사무엘상 제1장. 여로함의 아들 중에 엘가나라는 사람이 있었습니다. 엘가나는 에브라임 산지에 있는 라마다임 소빈 사람이며 숲 집안 사람이었습니다. 엘가나의 아버지 여로함은 엘리후의 아들이고 엘리후는 도우의 아들입니다. 도우는 에브라임 사람 숲의 아들입니다. 엘가나에게는 아내가 2명 있었는데 한 아내의 이름은 한나였고 다른 아내의 이름은 분인나였습니다. 분인나에게는 자녀가 있었지만 한나에게는 자녀가 없었습니다. 엘가나는 해마다 자기 마을 라마를 떠나 실로로 올라가서 만군의 여호와께 경배하며 제물을 바쳤습니다. 실로에서는 엘리의 아들인 홈니와 비나스가 여호와의 제사장으로 일하고 있었습니다. 엘가나는 제물을 바칠 때마다 자기 아내 분인나에게 몫을 나누어 주었습니다. 또 자기 아들과 딸들에게도 나누어 주었습니다. 그리고 한나에게는 언제나 더 많은 몫을 주었습니다. 왜냐하면 엘가나는 한나를 더 사랑했기 때문입니다. 그러나 여호와께서는 한나에게 자녀를 주지 않으셨습니다. 한나에게 자녀가 없었기 때문에 분인나는 한나를 괴롭히고 마음을 아프게 만들었습니다. 이런 일은 매년 그들이 실로에 있는 여호와의 장막으로 올라갈 때마다 일어났습니다. 분인나가 한나를 너무 괴롭혔으므로 한나는 울며 아무것도 먹지 않으려 하지 않았습니다. 한나의 남편인 엘가나가 한나에게 말했습니다. 여보, 왜 우시오? 왜 아무것도 먹지 않으시오? 왜 슬퍼하시오? 내가 있는 것이 당신에게 10명의 아들이 있는 것보다 더 낫지 않소? 엘가나의 가족이 실로에서 식사를 한 후에 한나가 자리에서 일어났습니다. 그때 제사장 엘리는 여호와의 성문 문 밖 가까이에 앉아 있었습니다. 한나는 매우 슬퍼 크게 울면서 여호와께 기도드렸습니다. 한나는 한 가지 약속을 했습니다. 만군의 여호와여, 저의 괴로움을 돌아봐 주십시오. 저를 기억해 주십시오. 저를 잊지 마십시오. 저에게 아들을 주신다면 그 아들과 그의 전 생애를 여호와께 드리고 아무도 그의 머리에 칼을 대지 못하게 하겠습니다. 한나가 계속해서 기도하고 있는 동안 엘리는 한나의 입술을 지켜보았습니다. 한나는 마음속으로 기도하고 있었기 때문에 입술은 움직였지만 소리는 내지 않았습니다. 그래서 엘리는 한나가 술에 취했다고 생각했습니다. 엘리가 한나에게 말했습니다. 언제까지 취해 있을 작정이요? 포도주를 끊으시오. 한나가 대답했습니다. 아닙니다, 제사장님. 저는 포도주나 술을 마시지 않았습니다. 저는 큰 괴로움 중에 있는 여자입니다. 여호와 앞에 저의 마음을 쏟아놓고 있었습니다. 저를 나쁜 여자로 생각하지 마십시오. 저는 너무나 괴롭고 슬퍼서 드리고 있는 중입니다. 엘리가 대답했습니다. 평안히 가시오. 이스라엘을 하나님께서 당신이 원하는 것을 허락해 주시기를 바라오. 한나가 말했습니다. 당신의 여종과 같은 저에게 자비를 베풀어 주시기를 바랍니다. 한나는 가족들이 머무르고 있는 곳으로 돌아가서 음식을 먹었습니다. 그리고 한나는 더 이상 슬퍼하지 않았습니다. 이튿날 아침 일찍 엘가나의 가족은 자리에서 일어나 여호와께 예배드렸습니다. 그리고 나서 그들은 라마에 있는 집으로 돌아갔습니다. 엘가나가 자기 아내 한나와 동침하니 여호와께서 한나를 기억해 주셨습니다. 드디어 한나는 임신을 하게 되었고 아들을 낳았습니다. 한나는 내가 여호와께 구하여 얻었다 하여 그 아이의 이름을 사무엘이라고 지었습니다. 엘가나와 그의 온 가족은 하나님께 해마다 드리는 제사인 매년제와 약속을 지키는 제사인 서원제를 드리기 위해 실로에 갔습니다. 엘가나가 또다시 하나님의 성전에 있는 실로로 올라가려고 할 때였습니다. 한나는 엘가나와 함께 가지 않겠다고 했습니다. 한나가 엘가나에게 말했습니다. 이 아이가 젖을 때면 이 아이를 데리고 여호와를 뵈러 가겠어요. 그리고 이 아이를 영원히 그곳에 있게 하겠어요. 한나의 남편 엘가나가 말했습니다. 당신 생각에 좋을 대로 하시오. 아기가 젖을 때까지 집에 남아 있으시오. 여호와께서 말씀하신 대로 이루어 주시기를 바라오. 그리하여 한나는 집에 남아 아들이 젖을 뗄 때까지 돌보았습니다. 사무엘이 젖을 뗄 만큼 자라나자 한나는 사무엘을 실로에 있는 여호와의 장막으로 데리고 갔습니다. 한나는 3년 된 수소와 밀가루 한 네바와 포도주 한 가죽 부대도 함께 가지고 갔습니다. 그런데 그 아이는 아직 어렸습니다. 그들은 소를 잡아 제물로 바쳤습니다. 그리고 나서 한나는 사무엘을 데리고 엘리에게 나아갔습니다. 한나가 말했습니다. 제사장님 맹세하건대 저는 제사장님 가까이에 서서 여호와께 기도드렸던 그 여자입니다. 저는 아이를 가지기 위해 기도드렸습니다. 여호와께서는 제 기도를 들어주시고 이 아이를 저에게 주셨습니다. 이제 이 아이를 여호와께 다시 돌려드립니다. 이 아이는 평생토록 여호와의 사람이 될 것입니다. 그런 뒤 그 아이는 그곳에서 여호와께 예배드렸습니다. 사무엘상 제2장. 한나가 기도했습니다. 여호와께서는 내 마음에 기쁨이 넘치게 해주셨습니다. 나는 여호와 안에서 매우 강해졌습니다. 나는 원수들 앞에서 웃을 수 있게 되었습니다. 여호와께서 나를 도우셨으니 나는 기쁩니다. 여호와와 같이 거룩하신 분은 없습니다. 여호와 외에는 다른 신이 없습니다. 우리 하나님과 같이 든든한 분도 없습니다. 거만한 자들아, 다시는 자랑하지 마라. 너희의 입에서 다시는 거만한 말을 뱉지 마라. 여호와께서는 모든 것을 아시는 하나님이시라네. 여호와께서는 너희 행동을 심판하신다. 용사들의 활은 부러졌도다. 넘어진 자가 힘을 얻었도다. 부자들은 이제 먹을 것을 위해 일해야 하고 가난한 자가 배불리 먹게 되었도다. 아기를 낳을 수 없던 여자가 지금은 7을 낳았고 아들을 많이 둔 여자는 슬픔에 빠져 있다. 여호와께서는 사람을 죽게도 하시고 살게도 하신다. 여호와께서는 사람을 죽은 자들 있는 곳으로 내려보내기도 하시고 죽은 자들을 다시 일으키기도 하신다. 여호와께서는 사람을 가난하게도 하시고 부유하게도 하신다. 여호와께서는 사람을 낮추기도 하시고 높이기도 하신다. 여호와께서는 가난한 사람을 흙먼지에서 일으키시고 궁핍한 사람을 잿더미에서 건져 올리신다. 여호와께서는 가난한 사람을 귀족들과 함께 앉게 하시고 영광의 자리를 차지하게 하신다. 여호와께서 땅에 기초를 놓으셨고 그 기초 위에 세계를 세우셨다. 여호와께서는 자기의 거룩한 백성을 지켜주시며 악한 사람을 어둠 속에서 잠잠하게 하신다. 그들의 힘이 아무리 세더라도 이길 수 없을 것이다. 여호와께서는 자기 원수를 물리치시고 그들을 향해 벼락을 내리신다. 여호와께서 온 땅을 심판하실 것이다. 여호와께서는 자기 왕에게 힘을 주시며 자기가 기름 부어 세운 왕을 강하게 하실 것이다. 엘가나는 라마에 있는 자기 집으로 돌아갔습니다. 그러나 어린 사무엘은 그곳에 남아 제사장 엘리 밑에서 여호와를 섬겼습니다. 엘리의 아들들은 나쁜 사람들이었습니다. 그들은 여호와를 두려워할 줄 몰랐습니다. 또 그들은 제사장이 백성에게 지켜야 하는 규정도 무시했습니다. 사람들이 제물을 가져와 그 고기를 삶으면 제사장의 종은 세 갈래로 된 창을 가지고 와서 냄비나 솥에 찔러 넣어 그 창에 걸려 나오는 고기를 제사장의 것으로 가져갔습니다. 이 제사장들은 제물을 바치려고 실로에 오는 모든 이스라엘 사람들을 이런 식으로 괴롭혔습니다. 더구나 제물로 바칠 고기의 기름을 떼어 태우기도 전에 제물을 바치는 사람에게 종을 보내어 제사장이 구워 먹을 고기를 주시오. 제사장은 삶은 고기를 좋아하지 않습니다. 날고기를 원합니다. 하고 말하게 합니다. 제물을 바치던 사람이 보통 때처럼 기름을 먼저 태우게 내버려 두시오. 그런 다음에 당신 좋을 대로 아무거나 가지고 가시오. 라고 말하면 제사장의 종은 아니요, 지금 당장 그 고기를 주시오. 지금 주지 않으면 강제로 빼앗겠소. 라고 합니다. 여호와께서 제사장의 종들이 매우 큰 죄를 짓고 있는 것을 보셨습니다. 그들은 여호와께 바치는 제물을 소중히 여기지 않고 함부로 다루었습니다. 그러나 사무엘은 여호와께 순종했습니다. 사무엘은 세마포로 만든 에봇을 입었습니다. 사무엘의 어머니는 제사 드리기 위해 남편과 함께 실로로 왔습니다. 사무엘의 어머니는 그때마다 자기 아들을 위해 작은 겉옷을 만들어 가지고 왔습니다. 엘리는 엘가나와 엘가나의 아내에게 한나가 기도하여 얻었다가 다시 여호와께 바친 사무엘을 대신해서 여호와께서 한나에게 다른 자녀를 주시기를 바라오 하고 축복해 주었습니다. 그리고 엘가나와 한나는 집으로 돌아갔습니다. 여호와께서는 한나를 도와주셨습니다. 한나가 아이를 낳게 해주셨습니다. 한나는 세 아들과 두 딸의 어머니가 되었습니다. 그리고 어린 사무엘은 자라면서 여호와를 섬겼습니다. 엘리는 나이가 매우 많았습니다. 엘리는 자기 아들들이 이스라엘 사람에게 하는 나쁜 일들을 다 들었습니다. 또 자기 아들들이 회막 앞에서 예배드리고 있는 여자들과 잠자리를 함께 한다는 이야기도 들었습니다. 엘리가 자기 아들들에게 말했습니다. 어찌하여 너희가 이런 나쁜 일을 하느냐? 내가 너희들이 한 모든 일들을 이 백성들을 통해 다 듣고 있다. 얘들아, 그러면 안 된다. 너희들에 대한 소문이 좋지 않다. 너희가 이 백성에게 죄를 짓게 만드는구나. 다른 사람에게 죄를 지으면 하나님께서 도와주실 수 있으나 여호와께 죄를 지으면 누가 구해줄 수 있겠느냐. 그러나 엘리의 아들들은 아버지의 말을 들으려 하지 않았습니다. 그것은 이미 여호와께서 그들을 죽이려고 결심하셨기 때문입니다. 어린 사무엘은 점점 자라갔습니다. 그러면서 사무엘은 하나님과 백성을 기쁘게 했습니다. 하나님의 사람이 엘리에게 와서 말했습니다. 여호와께서 말씀하셨다. 나는 너희 조상 집안의 이집트의 파라오에게 노예로 있을 때 그들에게 나타났다. 나는 그들을 이스라엘 모든 지파에서 뽑아 내 제사장이 되게 하였다. 나는 그들에게 내 제단으로 올라가 향을 피우고 에봇을 입게 하였다. 또 나는 이스라엘 사람들이 바치는 제물 중에서 얼마를 너희 조상의 집안이 가질 수 있게 해주었다. 그런데 너희는 왜 여호와께 바치는 제물과 성물을 더럽히느냐? 너는 나보다 내 아들들을 더 귀하게 여기고 이스라엘 사람들이 나에게 바치는 고기 중에서 제일 좋은 부분을 먹어 살이 쪘도다. 이스라엘의 하나님 여호와께서 말씀하신다. 나는 전에 너와 내 조상의 집안이 영원토록 나를 섬기는 일을 맡을 것이다 라고 약속했었다. 그러나 지금은 여호와께서 이렇게 말씀하신다. 결단코 그렇게 하지 않겠다. 나는 나를 소중히 여기는 사람을 소중히 여길 것이고 나를 소중히 여기지 않는 사람은 나도 소중히 여기지 않을 것이다. 이제 너와 너희 조상의 자손들을 멸망시킬 때가 되었다. 너희 집안에는 오래 사는 노인이 없을 것이다. 너는 내 집에서 괴로움을 겪게 될 것이다. 이스라엘에는 좋은 일들이 있게 될 것이나 너희 집안에는 노인이 한 사람도 없게 될 것이다. 나는 한 사람을 남겨놓아 내 제단에서 제사장으로 일하게 할 것이다. 그러나 그 사람은 너의 눈을 멀게 하고 너의 가슴을 아프게 할 것이다. 내 집의 사람들은 젊어서 죽을 것이다. 내가 너에게 겉으로 드러나는 표시 한 가지를 보여주겠다. 내 두 아들 홈니와 비나스는 같은 날에 죽을 것인데 내가 이것을 보고 나서야 내 말을 믿게 될 것이다. 나는 나를 위해 일할 충성스러운 제사장을 뽑을 것이다. 그 사람은 내 말을 잘 듣고 내가 원하는 일을 할 것이다. 나는 그의 집안을 강하게 만들겠다. 그는 언제나 내가 기름 부은 왕 앞에서 제사장으로 일할 것이다. 그때 너의 집안에 남아있는 모든 사람이 그에게 와서 그 앞에 절하며 그에게 돈이나 먹을 것을 구걸할 것이다. 그들은 자신들이 먹고 살 수 있게 제사장으로 써달라고 말할 것이다.
1 Samuel Chapter 3 The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. One night Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord, where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel. Samuel answered, Here I am. And he ran to Eli and said, Here I am, you called me. But Eli said, I did not call, go back and lie down. So he went and lay down. Again the Lord called, Samuel. And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, Here I am, you called me. My son, Eli said, I did not call, go back and lie down. Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. A third time the Lord called, Samuel. And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, Here I am, you called me. Then Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. So Eli told Samuel, Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. So Samuel went and lay down in his place. The Lord came and stood there, calling as at the other times, Samuel, Samuel. Then Samuel said, Speak, for your servant is listening. And the Lord said to Samuel, See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears about it tingle. At that time I will carry out against Eli everything I spoke against his family, from beginning to end. For I told him that I would judge his family forever because of the sin he knew about. His sons blasphemed God, and he failed to restrain them. Therefore I swore to the house of Eli, the guilt of Eli's house will never be atoned for, by sacrifice or offering. Samuel lay down until morning, and then opened the doors of the house of the Lord. He was afraid to tell Eli the vision, but Eli called him and said, Samuel, my son. Samuel answered, "Here I am." "What was it he said to you?" Eli asked. "Do not hide it from me. May God deal with you, be it ever so severely, if you hide from me anything he told you." So Samuel told him everything, hiding nothing from him. Then Eli said, "He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes." The Lord was with Samuel as he grew up, and he let none of Samuel's words fall to the ground. And all of Israel from Dan to Beersheba recognized that Samuel was attested as a prophet of the Lord. The Lord continued to appear at Shiloh, and there he revealed himself to Samuel through his word. Chapter 4. Now the Israelites went out to fight against the Philistines. The Israelites camped at Ebenezer, and the Philistines at Aphek. The Philistines deployed their forces to meet Israel, and as the battle spread, Israel was defeated by the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 of them on the battlefield. When the soldiers returned to camp, the elders of Israel asked, "Why did the Lord bring defeat on us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the Lord's covenant from Shiloh, so that he may go with us and save us from the hand of our enemies." So the people sent men to Shiloh, and they brought back the ark of the covenant of the Lord Almighty, who was enthroned between the cherubim. And Eli's 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of God. When the ark of the Lord's covenant came into the camp, all Israel raised such a great shout that the ground shook. Hearing the uproar, the Philistines asked, "What's all this shouting in the Hebrew camp?" When they learned that the ark of the Lord had come into the camp, the Philistines were afraid. "A god has come into the camp," they said. "Oh no, nothing like this has happened before. We are doomed. Who will deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods? They are the gods who struck the Egyptians with all kinds of plagues in the wilderness. Be strong, Philistines. Be men, or you will be subject to the Hebrews, as they have been to you. Be men and fight." So the Philistines fought, and the Israelites were defeated, and every man fled to his tent. The slaughter was very great. Israel lost 30,000 foot soldiers. The ark of God was captured, and Eli's 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, died. That same day, a Benjamite ran from the battle line and went to Shiloh with his clothes torn and dust on his head. When he arrived, there was Eli sitting on his chair by the side of the road, watching, because his heart feared for the ark of God. When the man entered the town and told what had happened, the whole town sent up a cry. Eli heard the outcry and asked, "What is the meaning of this uproar?" The man hurried over to Eli, who was 98 years old and whose eyes had failed so that he could not see. He told Eli, "I have just come from the battle line. I fled from it this very day." Eli asked, "What happened, my son?" The man who brought the news replied, "Israel fled before the Philistines, and the army has suffered heavy losses. Also your 2 sons Hophni and Phinehas are dead, and the ark of God has been captured." When he mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell backward off his chair by the side of the gate. His neck was broken and he died, for he was an old man and he was heavy. He had led Israel 40 years. His daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas, was pregnant and near the time of delivery. When she heard the news that the ark of God had been captured and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she went into labor and gave birth, but was overcome by her labor pains. As she was dying, the woman attending her said, "Don't despair, you have given birth to a son." But she did not respond or pay any attention. She named the boy Ichabod, saying, "The glory has departed from Israel, because of the capture of the ark of God and the deaths of her father-in-law and husband." She said, "The glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God has been captured." Chapter 5. After the Philistines had captured the ark of God, they took it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then they carried the ark into Dagon's temple and set it beside Dagon. When the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, there was Dagon, fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. They took Dagon and put him back in his place. But the following morning when they rose, there was Dagon, fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. His head and hands had been broken off and were lying on the threshold. Only his body remained. That is why to this day neither the priests of Dagon nor any others who enter Dagon's temple at Ashdod step on the threshold. The Lord's hand was heavy on the people of Ashdod and its vicinity. He brought devastation on them and afflicted them with tumors. When the people of Ashdod saw what was happening, they said, "The ark of the God of Israel must not stay here with us, because his hand is heavy on us on Dagon our God." So they called together all the rulers of the Philistines and asked them, "What shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel?" They answered, "Have the ark of the God of Israel moved to Gath?" So they moved the ark of the God of Israel. But after they had moved it, the Lord's hand was against that city, throwing it into a great panic. He afflicted the people of the city, both young and old, with an outbreak of tumors. So they sent the ark of God to Ekron. As the ark of God was entering Ekron, the people of Ekron cried out, "They have brought the ark of the God of Israel around us to kill us and our people." So they called together all the rulers of the Philistines and said, "Send the ark of the God of Israel away. Let it go back to its own place, or it will kill us and our people." For death had filled the city with panic. God's hand was very heavy on it. Those who did not die were afflicted with tumors, and the outcry of the city went up to heaven.
1 Samuel 6. When the ark of the Lord had been in Philistine territory 7 months, the Philistines called for the priests and the diviners and said, "What shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us how we should send it back to its place." They answered, "If you return the ark of the God of Israel, do not send it back to him without a gift. By all means send a guilt offering to him. Then you will be healed, and you will know why his hand has not been lifted from you." The Philistines asked, "What guilt offering should we send to him?" They replied, 5 gold tumors and 5 gold rats, according to the number of the Philistine rulers, because the same plague has struck both you and your rulers. Make models of the tumors and of the rats that are destroying the country, and give glory to Israel's God. Perhaps he will lift his hand from you and your gods in your land. Why do you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh did? When Israel's God dealt harshly with him, they did not send the Israelites out so they could go on their way. Now then, get a new cart ready, with 2 cows that have been calved and have never been yoked. Hitch the cows to the cart, but take their calves away and pin them up. Take the ark of the Lord and put it on the cart, and in a chest beside it, put the gold objects you are sending back to him as a guilt offering. Send it on its way. But keep watching it. If it goes up to its own territory toward Beth Shemesh, then the Lord has brought this great disaster on us. But if it does not, then we will know that it was not his hand that struck us, but that it happened to us by chance. So they did this. They took 2 such cows and hitched them to the cart and pinned up their calves. They placed the ark of the Lord on the cart, and along with it the chest containing the gold rats and the models of the tumors. Then the cows went straight up toward Beth Shemesh, keeping on the road and lowing all the way. They did not turn to the right or to the left. The rulers of the Philistines followed them as far as the border of Beth Shemesh. Now the people of Beth Shemesh were harvesting their wheat in the valley, and when they looked up and saw the ark, they rejoiced at the sight. The cart came to the field of Joshua of Beth Shemesh, and there it stopped beside a large rock. The people chopped up the wood of the cart and sacrificed the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. The Levites took down the ark of the Lord, together with the chest containing the gold objects, and placed them on the large rock. On that day the people of Beth Shemesh offered burnt offerings and made sacrifices to the Lord. The 5 rulers of the Philistines saw all this and then returned the same day to Ekron. These are the gold tumors the Philistines sent as a guilt offering to the Lord, 1 each for Ashdod, Gaza, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron. And the number of the gold rats was according to the number of Philistine towns belonging to the 5 rulers, the fortified towns with their country villages. The large rock on which the Levites set the ark of the Lord is a witness to this day in the field of Joshua of Beth Shemesh. But God struck down some of the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh, putting 70 of them to death, because they looked into the ark of the Lord. The people mourned because of the heavy blow the Lord had dealt them. And the people of Beth Shemesh asked, "Who can stand in the presence of the Lord, this holy God? And whom will the ark go up from here?" Then they sent messengers to the people of Kiriath Jearim, saying, "The Philistines have returned the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it up to your town." 1 Samuel 7. So the men of Kiriath Jearim came and took up the ark of the Lord. They brought it to Abinadab's house on the hill, and consecrated Eleazar his son to guard the ark of the Lord. The ark remained at Kiriath Jearim a long time, 20 years in all. Then all the people of Israel turned back to the Lord. So Samuel said to all the Israelites, "If you are returning to the Lord with all your hearts, Then rid yourselves of the foreign gods and the Ashtoreths, and commit yourselves to the Lord and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. So the Israelites put away the Baals and Ashtoreths, and served the Lord only. Then Samuel said, Assemble all Israel at Mizpah, and I will intercede with the Lord for you. Then they had assembled at Mizpah. They drew water and poured it out before the Lord. On that day they fasted, and there they confessed, We have sinned against the Lord. Now Samuel was serving as leader of Israel at Mizpah. When the Philistines heard that Israel had assembled at Mizpah, the rulers of the Philistines came up to attack them. When the Israelites heard of it, they were afraid because of the Philistines. They said to Samuel, Do not stop crying out to the Lord our God for us, that he may rescue us from the hands of the Philistines. Then Samuel took a suckling lamb and sacrificed it as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. He cried out to the Lord on Israel's behalf, and the Lord answered him. While Samuel was sacrificing the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to engage Israel in battle. But that day the Lord thundered with loud thunder against the Philistines and threw them into such a panic that they were routed before the Israelites. The men of Israel rushed out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines, slaughtering them along the way to a point below Beth-kar. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shen. They named it Ebenezer, saying, Thus far the Lord has helped us. So the Philistines were subdued and they stopped invading Israel's territory. Throughout Samuel's lifetime, the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines. The towns from Ekron to Gath that the Philistines had captured from Israel were restored to Israel, and Israel delivering the neighboring territory from the hands of the Philistines. And there was peace between Israel and the Amorites. Samuel continued as Israel's leader all the days of his life. From year to year he went on a circuit from Bethel to Gilgal to Mizpah, judging Israel in all those places. But he always went back to Ramah, where his home was, and there he also held court for Israel, and he built an offering there to the Lord. 1 Samuel 8. When Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as Israel's leaders. The name of his firstborn was Joel. The name of his second was Abijah. They served at Beersheba. But his sons did not follow his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain, and accepted bribes and perverted justice. So all the elders of Israel gathered together, and came to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, You are old, and your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have. But when they said, Give us a king to lead us, this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord told him, Listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king, as they have done from the day I brought them up out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are doing to you. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly, and let them know what the king who will reign over them will claim as his rights. Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, This is what the king who will reign over you will claim as his rights. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of his chariots. Some he will assign to be commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and others to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and still others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants. He will take 1/10 of your grain and of your vintage, and give it to his officials and attendants. Your male and female servants, and the best of your cattle and donkeys he will take for his own use. He will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. When that day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. But the people refused to listen to Samuel. No, they said, We want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations, with a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battles. When Samuel heard all that the people said, he repeated it before the Lord. The Lord answered, Listen to them and give them a king. Then Samuel said to the Israelites, Everyone go back to your own town.
1 Samuel chapter 9. Samuel anoints Saul. There was a Benjamite, a man of standing, whose name was Kish son of Abiel, the son of Zerah, the son of Bechorath, the son of Aphiah of Benjamin. Kish had a son named Saul, as handsome a young man as could be found anywhere in Israel, and he was a head taller than anyone else. Now the donkeys bringing the Saul's father Kish were lost, and Kish said to his son Saul, "Take one of the servants with you, and go and look for the donkeys." So he passed through the hill country of Ephraim, and through the area around Shalisha, but they did not find them. They went into the district of Shalem, but the donkeys were not there. Then he passed through the territory of Benjamin, but they did not find them. When they reached the district of Zoph, Saul said to the servant who was with him, "Come, let's go back, or my father will stop thinking about the donkeys and start worrying about us." But the servant replied, "Look, in this town there is a man of God. He is highly respected, and everything he says comes true. Let's go there now. Perhaps he will tell us what way to take." Saul said to his servant, "If we go, what can we give the man? The food in our sacks is gone. We have no gift to take to the man of God. What do we have?" The servant answered him again. "Look," he said, "I have a quarter of shekel of silver. I will give it to the man of God, so that he will tell us what way to take." Formerly in Israel, if someone went to inquire God, they would say, "Come, let us go to the seer," because a prophet of today used to be called a seer. "Good," Saul said to his servant, "Come, let's go." So they set out for the town where the man of God was. As they were going up the hill to the town, they met some young women coming out to draw water, and they asked them, "Is the seer here?" "He is," they answered. "He is ahead of you. Hurry now, he has just come to our town today, for the people have a sacrifice at the high place." As soon as you enter the town, you will find him before he goes up to the high place to eat. The people will not begin eating until he comes, because he must bless the sacrifice afterward, those who are invited to eat. Go up now, you should find him about this time. They went up to the town, and as they were entering it, there was Samuel coming toward them on his way up to the high place. Now the day before Saul came, the Lord had revealed this to Samuel. "About this time tomorrow I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin. Anoint him ruler over my people Israel. He will deliver them from the hand of the Philistines. I have looked on my people, for their cry has reached me." When Samuel saw sight of Saul, the Lord said to him, "This is the man I spoke to you about. He will govern my people." Saul approached Samuel in the gateway and asked, "Would you please tell me where the seer's house is?" "I am the seer," Samuel replied. "Go up ahead of me to the high place, for today you are to eat with me, and in the morning I will send you on your way and will tell you all that is in your heart. As for the donkeys you lost 3 days ago, do not worry about them, they have been found. And to whom is all the desire of Israel turned, if not to you and your whole family line?" Saul answered, "But I am not a Benjamite, from the smallest tribe of Israel, and is not my clan the least of all the clans of the tribe of Benjamin? Why do you say such a thing to me?" Then Samuel brought Saul and his servant into the hall and seated them at the head of those who were invited, about 30 in number. Samuel said to the cook, "Bring the piece of meat I gave you, the one I told you to lay aside." So the cook took the thigh with what was on it and set it in front of Saul. Samuel said, "Here is what has been kept for you. Eat, because it is set aside for you for this occasion from the time I said, 'I have invited guests.'" And Saul dined with Samuel that day. After they came down from the high place to the town, Samuel talked with Saul on the roof of his house. They rose about daybreak, and Samuel called to Saul on the roof, "Get ready, and I will send you on your way." When Saul got ready, he and Samuel went outside together. As they were going down to the edge of the town, Samuel said to Saul, "Tell the servant to go on ahead of us." And the servant did so. "But you stay here for a while, so that I may give you a message from God." 1 Samuel chapter 10. Then Samuel took a flask of olive oil and poured it on Saul's head and kissed him, saying, "Has not the Lord anointed you ruler over his inheritance? When you leave me today, you will meet 2 men near Rachel's tomb, at Zalzah on the border of Benjamin. They will say to you, 'The donkeys you set out to look for have been found, and now your father has stopped thinking about them and is worried about you. He is asking, "What shall I do about my son?" Then you will go on from there until you reach the great tree of Tabor. 3 men going up to worship God at Bethel will meet you there. One will be carrying 3 young goats, another 3 loaves of bread, and another a skin of wine. They will greet you and offer you 2 loaves of bread, which you will accept from them. After that, you will go to Gibeah of God, where there is a Philistine outpost. As you approach the town, you will meet a procession of prophets coming down from the high place with lyres, timbrels, pipes, and harps being played before them, and they will be prophesying. The Spirit of the Lord will come powerfully upon you, and you will prophesy with them, and you will be changed into a different person. Once these things are fulfilled, do whatever your hands find to do, for God is with you. Go down ahead of me to Gilgal. I will surely come down to you to sacrifice burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, but you must wait 7 days until I come to you and tell you what you are to do. Saul made king. As Saul turned to leave Samuel, God changed Saul's heart, and all these signs were fulfilled that day. When he and his servant arrived at Gibeah, a procession of prophets met him. The Spirit of God came powerfully upon him, and he joined in their prophesying. When all those who had formerly known him saw him prophesying with the prophets, they asked each other, "What is this that has happened to the son of Kish? Is Saul also among the prophets?" A man who lived there answered, "And who is their father?" And it became a saying, "Is Saul also among the prophets?" After Saul stopped prophesying, he went to the high place. Now Saul's uncle asked him and his servant, "Where have you been?" "Looking for the donkeys," he said. "But when we saw they were not to be found, we went to Samuel." Saul's uncle said, "Tell me what Samuel said to you." Saul replied, "He assured us that the donkeys had been found," but he did not tell his uncle what Samuel had said about the kingship. Samuel summoned the people of Israel to the Lord at Mizpah and said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought Israel up out of Egypt, and I delivered you from the power of Egypt and all the kingdoms that oppressed you. But you have now rejected your God, who saves you out of all your disasters and calamities. And you have said, 'No, appoint a king over us.' So now present yourselves before the Lord by your tribes and clans." When Samuel had all Israel come forward by tribes, the tribe of Benjamin was taken by lot. Then he brought forward the tribe of Benjamin, clan by clan, and Matri's clan was taken. Finally, Saul, son of Kish, was taken. But when they looked for him, he was not to be found. So they inquired further from the Lord, "Has the man come here yet?" And the Lord says, "Yes, he has hidden him among the supplies." They ran and brought him out. And as he stood among the people, he was a head taller than any of the others. Samuel said to all the people, "Do you see the man the Lord has chosen? There is no one like him among all the people." Then the people shouted, "Long live the king!" Samuel explained to the people the rights and duties of kingship. He wrote them down on a scroll and deposited it before the Lord. Then Samuel dismissed the people to go to their own homes. Saul also went to his home in Gibeah, accompanied by valiant men whose heart God has touched. But some scoundrels said, "How can this fellow save us?" They despised him and brought him no gifts, but Saul kept silent. 1 Samuel chapter 11. Saul rescues the city of Jabesh. Nahash the Ammonite went up and besieged Jabesh Gilead, and all the men of Jabesh said to him, "Make a treaty with us, and we will be subject to you." But Nahash the Ammonite replied, "I will make a treaty with you only on the condition that I gouge out the right eye of every one of you, and so bring disgrace on all Israel." The elders of Jabesh said to him, "Give us 7 days so we can send messengers to Israel. If no one comes to rescue us, we will surrender to you." When the messengers came to Gibeah of Saul and reported these terms to the people, they all wept aloud. Just then Saul was returning from the fields behind his oxen, and he asked, "What is wrong with everyone? Why are they weeping?" Then they repeated to him what the men of Jabesh had said. When Saul heard their words, the Spirit of God came powerfully upon him, and he burned with anger. He took a pair of oxen, cut them into pieces, and sent the pieces by messengers throughout Israel, proclaiming, "This is what will be done to the oxen of anyone who does not follow Saul and Samuel." Then the terror of the Lord fell on the people, and they came out together as one. When Saul mustered them at Bezek, the men of Israel numbered 300,000, and those of Judah 30,000. They told the messengers who had come, "Say to the men of Jabesh Gilead, by the time the sun is hot tomorrow, you will be rescued." When the messengers went and reported this to the men of Jabesh, they were elated. They said to the Ammonites, "Tomorrow we will surrender to you, and you can do to us whatever you like." The next day Saul separated his men into 3 divisions. During the last watch of the night, they broke into the camp of the Ammonites and slaughtered them until the heat of the day. Those who survived were scattered, so that no 2 of them were left together. Saul confirmed as king. The people then said to Samuel, "Who was it that asked, 'Shall Saul reign over us?' Turn these men over to us so that we may put them to death." But Saul said, No one will be put to death today, for this day the Lord has rescued Israel." Then Samuel said to his people, "Come, let us go to Gilgal, and there renew the kingship." So all the people went to Gilgal and made Saul king in the presence of the Lord. There they sacrificed fellowship offerings before the Lord, and Saul and all the Israelites held a great celebration.
1 Samuel 12. Then Samuel addressed all Israel, "I have done as you asked and given you a king. Your king is now your leader. I stand here before you, an old gray-haired man, and my sons serve you. I have served as your leader from the time I was a boy to this very day. Now testify against me in the presence of the Lord and before his anointed one. Whose ox or donkey have I stolen? Have I ever cheated on any of you? Have I ever oppressed you? Have I ever taken a bribe and perverted justice? Tell me, and I will make right whatever I've done wrong." "No," they replied, "you have never cheated or oppressed us, and you have never taken even a single bribe." "The Lord and his anointed one are my witnesses today," Samuel declared, "that my hands are clean." "Yes, he is a witness," they replied. "It was the Lord who appointed Moses and Aaron," Samuel continued. "He brought your ancestors out of the land of Egypt. Now stand here quietly before the Lord as I remind you of all the great things the Lord has done for you and your ancestors." When the Israelites were in Egypt and cried out to the Lord, he sent Moses and Aaron to rescue them from Egypt and to bring them to this land. But the people soon forgot about the Lord their God, so he handed them over to Sisera, the commander of Hazor's army, and also to the Philistines and to the king of Moab, who fought against him. Then they cried to the Lord again and confessed, "We have sinned by turning away from the Lord and worshipping the images of Baal and Ashtoreth. But we worship you and you alone, if you will rescue us from our enemies." Then the Lord sent Gideon, Bedan, Jephthah, and Samuel to save you, and you lived in safety. Now if you fear and worship the Lord and listen to his voice, and if you do not rebel against the Lord's commands, then both you and your king will show that you recognize the Lord as your God. But if you rebel against the Lord's command and refuse to listen to him, then his hand will be as heavy upon you as it was upon your ancestors. Now stand here and see the great thing the Lord is about to do. You know that it does not rain at this time of the year during the wheat harvest. I will ask the Lord to send thunder and rain today. Then you will realize how wicked you have been in asking the Lord for a king. So Samuel called the Lord, and the Lord sent thunder and rain that day. And all the people were terrified of the Lord of Samuel. "Pray to the Lord your God for us, or we will die," they all said to Samuel, "for now we have added to our sins by asking for a king." "Don't be afraid," Samuel reassured him. "You have certainly done wrong, but make sure that now that you worship the Lord with all your heart and don't turn your back on him. The Lord will not abandon his people because that would dishonor his great name, for it has pleaded the Lord to make you his very own people. As for me, I'll certainly not sin against the Lord by ending my prayers for you, and I'll continue to teach you what is good and right. But be sure to fear the Lord and faithfully serve him. Think of all the wonderful things he has done to you, but if you continue to sin, and you and your king will be swept away." 1 Samuel 3. Samuel was 30 years old when he began king, and he reigned for 42 years. Saul selected 3,000 special troops from the army of Israel and sent the rest of the men home. He took 2,000 of the chosen men with him to Michmash and the hill country of Bethel. The other 1,000 went with Saul's son Jonathan to Gibeah in the land of Benjamin. Soon after this, Jonathan attacked and defeated the garrison of Philistines at Geba. The news spread quickly among the Philistines, so Saul blew the ram's horn throughout the land, saying, "Hebrews, hear this, rise up and revolt." All Israel heard the news that Saul has destroyed the Philistine garrison at Geba, and that the Philistines now hated the Israelites more than ever. So the entire Israelite army was summoned to join Saul at Gilgal. The Philistines mustered a mighty army of 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and as many warriors as the grain of sand on the seashore. They camped at Michmash, east of Beth-aven. The men of Israel saw what a tight spot they were in, and because they were hard-pressed by the enemy, they tried to hide in caves, thickets, rocks, holes, and cisterns. Some of them crossed the Jordan River and escaped into the land of Gad and Gilead. Meanwhile, Saul stayed at Gilgal, and his men were trembling with fear. Saul waited there 7 days for Samuel, as Samuel had instructed him earlier, but the Samuel didn't come. Saul realized that his troops were rapidly slipping away, so he demanded, "Bring me the burnt offering and the peace offerings," and Saul sacrificed the burnt offering himself. Just as Saul was finishing with the burnt offering, Samuel arrived. Saul went out to meet and welcome him, but Samuel said, "What is this you have done?" Saul replied, "I saw my man scattering from me, and you didn't arrive when you said you would, and the Philistines are at Michmash ready for battle. So I said, the Philistines are ready to march against us at Gilgal, and I haven't even asked for the Lord's help. So I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering myself before you came." "How foolish!" Samuel exclaimed. "You have not kept the command your God has given you. Have you kept it, the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom must end, for the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart. The Lord has already appointed him to be the leader of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command." Samuel then left Gilgal and went on his way, but the rest of the troops went with Samuel to meet the army. They set out from Gilgal to Gibeah in the land of Benjamin. When Saul counted the men who were still with him, he found only 600 were left. Saul and Jonathan and the troops with them were staying at Gibeah in the land of Benjamin. The Philistines set up the camp at Michmash. 3 raiding parties soon left the camp of the Philistines. One went north towards Ophrah in the land of Shual, another went west to Beth-horon, and the third moved towards the border above the valley of Zeboim near the wilderness. There were no blacksmiths in the land of Israel in those days. The Philistines wouldn't allow them for fear they would make swords and spears for the Hebrews. So whenever the Israelites needed to sharpen their plowshares, picks, axe, or sickles, they had to take him to a Philistine blacksmith. The charges were as follows: 1/4 of an ounce of silver for sharpening a plowshare or a pick, and 1/8 of an ounce for sharpening an axe, or making the point of an ox goad. So on the day of the battle, none of the people of Israel had a sword or spear except for Saul and Jonathan. The pass at Michmash had meanwhile been secured by the contingent of the Philistine army. 1 Samuel 14. One day Jonathan said to his armor-bearer, "Come on, let's go over to where the Philistines have their outpost." But Jonathan did not tell his father what he was doing. Meanwhile, Saul and his 600 men were camped on the outskirts of Gibeah, around the pomegranate tree at Migron. Among Saul's men was Ahijah the priest, who was wearing the ephod, the priestly vest. Ahijah was the son of Ichabod's brother Ahihud, son of Phinehas, son of Eli, the priest of the Lord, who had served at Shiloh. No one realized that Jonathan had left the Israelite camp. To reach the Philistine outpost, Jonathan had to go down between 2 rocky cliffs that were called Bozez and Seneh. The cliff on the north was in front of Michmash, and the one on the south was in front of Gibeah. "Let's go across to the outposts of those pagans," Jonathan said to his armor-bearer. "Perhaps the Lord will help us, for nothing can hinder the Lord. He can win a battle whether he has many warriors or only a few." "Do what you think is best," the armor-bearer replied. "I'm with you completely, whatever you decide." "All right then," Jonathan told him. "We will cross over and let them see us. If they say to us, 'Stay where you are or we'll kill you,' then we will stop and not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come up and fight,' then we will go up. That will be the Lord's sign that he will help us defeat them." When the Philistines saw them coming, they shouted, "Look, the Hebrews are crawling out of the holes." Then the men from the outpost shouted to Jonathan, "Come on up here and we'll teach you a lesson. Come on, climb right behind me." Jonathan said to his armor-bearer, "For the Lord will help us defeat them." They killed some 20 men in all, and all their bodies were scattered over about half an acre. Suddenly, panic broke out in the Philistine army, both in the camp and in the field, including even the outposts and raiding parties. And just then an earthquake struck, and everyone was terrified. Saul's lookouts in Gibeah of Benjamin saw a strange sight. The vast army of Philistines began to melt away in every direction. "Call the roll and find out who's missing," Saul ordered. And when they checked, they found out that Jonathan and his armor-bearer were gone. Then Saul shouted to Ahijah, "Bring the ephod here," for at the time Ahijah was wearing the ephod in front of the Israelites. But while Saul was talking to the priest, the confusion in the Philistine camp grew louder and louder. So Saul said to the priest, "Never mind, let's get going." Then Saul and all his men rushed out to the battle and found the Philistines killing each other. There was terrible confusion everywhere. Even the Hebrews who had previously gone over to the Philistine army revolted and joined in with Saul, Jonathan, and the rest of the Israelites. Likewise, the men of Israel who were hiding in the hill country of Ephraim joined the chase when they saw the Philistines running away. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle continued to rage even beyond Bethaven. Now the men of Israel were pressed to exhaustion that day, because Saul had placed them under an oath, saying, Let a curse fall on anyone who eats before evening, before I have full revenge on my enemies. So no one ate anything all day, even though they had all found honeycomb on the ground in the forest. They didn't dare touch the honey because they all feared the oath they had taken. But Jonathan had not heard his father's command, and he dipped the end of his stick into a piece of honeycomb and ate the honey. After he had eaten it, he felt refreshed. But one of the men saw him and said, "Your father made the army take a strict oath that anyone who eats food today will be cursed. That is why everyone is weary and faint." "My father has made trouble for us all," Jonathan exclaimed. "A command like that only hurts us. See how refreshed I am now that I have eaten this little bit of honey." If the men had been allowed to eat freely from the food they had found among our enemies, then think how many more Philistines we could have killed. They chased and killed the Philistines all day from Michmash to Aijalon, growing more and more faint. That evening they rushed for the battle, plundered and butchered the sheep, goats, cattle, and calves, but they ate them without draining the blood. Someone reported to Saul, "Look, the men are sinning against the Lord by eating meat that still has blood in it." "That is very wrong," Saul said. "Find a large stone and roll it over there. Then go out among the troops and tell them, 'Bring the cattle, sheep, and goats here to kill me. Kill them here and drain the blood before you eat them. Do not sin against the Lord by eating the meat with the blood still in it.'" So that night all the troops brought the animals and slaughtered them here. Then Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first of the altars he built to the Lord. Then Saul said, "Let's chase the Philistines all night and plunder them until sunrise. Let's destroy every last one of them." His men replied, "We'll do whatever you think is best." But the priest said, "Let's ask God first." So Saul asked God, "Should we go after the Philistines? Will you help us defeat them?" But God made no reply that day. Then Saul said to the leaders, "Something's wrong. I want all my army commanders to come here. We must find out what sin was committed today. I vow by the name of the Lord who had rescued Israel that the sinner will surely die, even if it is my own son Jonathan." But no one would tell him what the trouble was. Then Saul said, "Jonathan and I will stand over here, and all of you stand over there." And the people responded to Saul, "Whatever you think is best." Then Saul prayed, "O Lord God of Israel, please show us who is guilty and who is innocent." Then they cast sacred lots, and Jonathan and Saul were chosen as the guilty ones, and the people were declared innocent. Then Saul said, "Now cast lots again, and choose between me and Jonathan." And Jonathan was shown to be the guilty one. "Tell me what you have done," Saul demanded of Jonathan. "I tasted a little honey," Jonathan admitted. "It was the only bit on the end of my stick. Does that deserve death?" "Yes, Jonathan," Saul said. "You must die. May God strike me and even kill me if you do not die for this." But the people broke in and said to Saul, "Jonathan has won this great victory for Israel. Should he die? Far from it. As surely as the Lord lives, no one hair on his head will be touched, for God helped them do a great deed today." So the people rescued Jonathan, and he was not put to death. Then Saul called back the army from chasing the Philistines, and the Philistines returned home. Now when Saul had secured his grasp on Israel's throne, he fought against his enemies in every direction, against Moab, Ammon, Edom, the kings of Zobah, and the Philistines. And wherever he turned, he was victorious. He performed great deeds and conquered the Amalekites, saving Israel from all those who had plundered them. Saul's sons included Jonathan, Ishbosheth, and Malchishua. He also had two daughters, Merab, who was older, and Michal. Saul's wife was Ahinoam, the daughter of Ahimaaz. The commander of Saul's army was Abner, the son of Saul's uncle Ner. The Israelites fought constantly with the Philistines throughout Saul's lifetime. So whenever Saul observed a young man who was brave and strong, he drafted him into his army.
사무엘상 15장. 사무엘이 사울에게 말했습니다. 여호와께서 나를 보내셔서 당신을 이스라엘의 왕으로 임명하셨소. 이제 여호와의 말씀을 들으시오. 만군의 여호와께서 이렇게 말씀하셨소. 이스라엘 사람들이 이집트에서 나올 때 아말렉 사람들이 길을 막으려 했던 것을 내가 기억한다. 그러니 이제 가서 아말렉 사람들을 공격하여라. 아말렉 사람들의 가진 모든 것을 나에게 바치는 제물로 삼아 없애버려라. 아무도 살려주지 마라. 남자와 여자, 어린아이와 갓난아기뿐만 아니라 소와 양과 낙타와 나귀들도 모두 죽여 없애버려라. 그리하여 사울은 들라임으로 군대를 모았습니다. 군인이 20만 명이었고 유다 사람이 10,000명 있었습니다. 사울은 아말렉 성으로 가서 골짜기에 군인들을 숨겨 놓았습니다. 사울이 겐 사람들에게 말했습니다. 아말렉 사람들을 떠나시오. 아말렉 사람들과 함께 당신들까지도 죽이고 싶지 않소. 당신들은 이스라엘 사람들이 이집트에서 나올 때 그들에게 친절을 베풀었소. 그리하여 겐 사람들은 아말렉 사람들에게서 떠났습니다. 사울은 아말렉 사람들의 물리쳐 이었습니다. 사울은 하일라에서 이집트의 경계에 있는 술까지 이르는 모든 길에서 아말렉 사람들과 싸웠습니다. 사울은 아말렉 왕 아각을 사로잡았습니다. 사울은 아각의 군대를 모두 칼로 죽였습니다. 그러나 사울과 그의 군대는 아각만은 죽이지 않고 살려주었습니다. 그리고 제일 좋은 양과 살진 소와 양뿐만 아니라 그 밖의 모든 좋은 동물들도 살려주었습니다. 사울과 그의 군대는 그 동물들을 죽이기를 좋아하지 않았습니다. 그들은 약하거나 쓸모없는 동물들만 죽였습니다. 그때 여호와께서 사무엘에게 말씀하셨습니다. 사울이 이제는 나의 말을 따르지 않는다. 사울을 왕으로 세운 것이 후회된다. 사울은 내 명령에 순종하지 않았다. 사무엘은 이 말씀을 듣고 당황하였습니다. 그는 밤새도록 하나님께 마음을 돌리시기를 간구하며 큰 소리로 부르짖었습니다. 이튿날 아침 일찍 사무엘은 사울을 만나러 올라갔습니다. 그런데 사람들이 사무엘에게 이렇게 말했습니다. 사울은 갈멜로 가서 자기 이름을 기리기 위해 기념비를 세웠습니다. 사울은 지금 길갈로 내려갔습니다. 그 후에 사무엘이 사울에게 갔습니다. 사울이 말했습니다. 여호와께서 당신에게 복을 주시길 빕니다. 나는 여호와의 명령에 순종했습니다. 이 말을 듣고 사무엘이 말했습니다. 그러면 내 귀에 들리는 저 양의 소리와 소의 소리는 무엇입니까? 사울이 대답했습니다. 군인들이 아말렉 사람들에게서 빼앗은 것입니다. 당신의 하나님 여호와께 제물로 바치기 위해 제일 좋은 양과 소들을 남겨둔 것입니다. 하지만 다른 동물들은 다 죽여 없앴습니다. 사무엘이 사울에게 말했습니다. 그만두시오. 어젯밤에 여호와께서 나에게 하신 말씀을 들으시오. 사울이 말했습니다. 말해보시오. 사무엘이 말했습니다. 옛날 당신은 스스로 작은 사람이라고 겸손해하지 않았습니까? 그때 여호와께서 당신에게 기름을 부어 이스라엘을 왕으로 세우지 않았습니까? 그리고 여호와께서는 가서 저 나쁜 백성 아말렉 사람들을 멸망시켜라. 그들과 전쟁을 하여 한 사람도 빠짐없이 다 죽여라 하고 당신에게 이 일을 맡기지 않았습니까? 그런데 왜 당신은 여호와의 명령에 순종하지 않았소? 왜 당신은 제일 좋은 것들을 없애지 않았소? 왜 당신은 여호와께서 악하다고 말씀하신 일을 하였소? 사울이 대답했습니다. 하지만 나는 여호와께 순종하였소. 나는 여호와께서 하라고 하신 일을 하였소. 나는 아말렉 사람들을 다 죽였소. 그리고 그들의 왕 아각도 사로잡아 왔소. 군인들이 당신의 하나님 여호와께 길갈에서 제물을 바치기 위해 제일 좋은 양과 소들을 남겨놓았을 뿐이요. 그러나 사무엘이 말했습니다. 여호와를 더 기쁘시게 할 것이 무엇이겠소? 태워드리는 제물인 번제물과 그 밖의 제사요? 아니요, 순종이요. 아니면 순종이요. 하나님께 순종하는 것이 제사보다 낫소. 하나님의 말씀을 듣는 것이 수리양의 기름을 바치는 것보다 낫소. 순종하지 않는 것은 점쟁이의 속임수만큼 나쁘고 교만한 고집은 우상을 섬기는 것만큼 나쁘오. 당신은 여호와의 명령을 듣지 않았소. 그러므로 이제 여호와께서 당신을 버려 왕이 되지 못하게 하실 것이오. 그러자 사울이 사무엘에게 말했습니다. 내가 죄를 지었소. 내가 여호와의 명령에 순종하지 않았소. 내가 당신이 한 말을 따르지 않았소. 나는 백성이 두려워서 백성이 하자는 대로 하였소. 제발 내 죄를 용서해 주시오. 나와 함께 가서 내가 여호와께 예배드리게 해 주시오. 그러나 사무엘이 사울에게 말했습니다. 나는 당신과 함께 가지 않겠소. 당신은 여호와의 명령을 듣지 않았소. 그러므로 이제 여호와께서 당신을 이스라엘의 왕이 되지 못하게 하셨소. 사무엘이 떠나려 하였습니다. 사울이 사무엘의 옷을 붙잡다가 그만 옷을 찢고 말았습니다. 사무엘이 사울에게 말했습니다. 여호와께서 오늘 이스라엘 나라를 이 옷자락처럼 찢어 당신에게서 빼앗아 당신의 이웃 중 한 사람에게 주셨소. 여호와께서 이 나라를 당신보다 나은 사람에게 주셨소. 여호와께서는 이스라엘의 영원하신 분이요. 그분께서는 거짓말을 하지 않으시고 자기 마음을 바꾸지도 않으시오. 여호와께서는 사람이 아니시오. 그러므로 사람처럼 마음을 바꾸시지 않을 것이요. 사울이 대답했습니다. 내가 죄를 지었소. 하지만 내 백성의 장로들과 이스라엘 백성들 앞에서는 나를 높여주시오. 너와 함께 가서 당신의 하나님 여호와께 예배드릴 수 있도록 해주시오. 이 말을 듣고 사무엘은 사울과 함께 갔고 사울은 여호와께 예배드렸습니다. 그 후에 사무엘이 말했습니다. 아말렉 사람들의 왕 아각을 데리고 오시오. 아각이 사슬에 묶여 사무엘에게 왔습니다. 아각은 틀림없이 이제 난 살아났다 라고 생각하며 기뻐했습니다. 사무엘이 아각에게 말했습니다. 내 칼 때문에 많은 어머니들이 자식을 잃었다. 이제 내 어머니가 자식을 잃을 차례이다. 그리고 나서 사무엘은 길갈에 있는 여호와의 성소 앞에서 아각을 칼로 쳤습니다. 그리고 나서 사무엘은 그곳을 떠나 라마로 갔습니다. 그러나 사울은 기브아에 있는 자기 집으로 갔습니다. 사무엘은 더 이상 사울을 만나지 않았습니다. 사무엘은 사울 때문에 마음이 아팠습니다. 또 여호와께서는 사울을 이스라엘의 왕으로 삼으신 것을 후회하셨습니다. 사무엘상 16장. 여호와께서 사무엘에게 말씀하셨습니다. 너는 언제까지 사울 때문에 마음 아파할 것이냐? 나는 이미 사울을 버려 이스라엘의 왕이 되지 못하게 하였다. 이제 너는 그릇에 올리브 기름을 채우고 가거라. 내가 너를 베들레헴에 사는 이새에게 보낸다. 내가 그 사람의 아들 중 하나를 왕으로 뽑았다. 사무엘이 말했습니다. 제가 가면 사울이 그 소식을 듣고 저를 죽이려 할 것입니다. 여호와께서 말씀하셨습니다. 암송아지를 몰고 가서 여호와께 제물을 바치러 왔다고 말하여라. 그리고 제사 드릴 때 이새를 초대하여라. 그 다음 내가 무엇을 해야 할지 가르쳐 주겠다. 이새의 아들 가운데 내가 가리키는 사람에게 너는 기름을 부어라. 사무엘은 여호와께서 말씀하신 대로 했습니다. 사무엘이 베들레헴에 도착하자 베들레헴의 장로들이 두려움에 떨었습니다. 장로들이 사무엘에게 나와 물었습니다. 평화로운 일로 오시는 겁니까? 그렇소, 평화로운 일로 왔소. 여호와께 제물을 바치려고 왔소. 여호와를 위해 스스로 거룩하게 한 다음 나와 함께 제사를 드립시다. 하고 사무엘이 대답했습니다. 사무엘은 이새와 그의 아들들을 여호와 앞에서 거룩하고 깨끗하게 한 뒤 그들을 제사에 초대하였습니다. 이새와 그의 아들들이 도착했을 때 사무엘은 엘리압을 보았습니다. 사무엘은 생각하였습니다. 틀림없이 여호와께서는 여기 서 있는 이 사람을 뽑으셨을 것이다. 그러나 여호와께서 사무엘에게 말씀하셨습니다. 엘리압의 멋있는 모습과 키 큰 모습을 보지 마라. 나는 엘리압을 뽑지 않았다. 내가 보는 것은 사람이 보는 것과 같지 않다. 사람은 겉모양을 보지만 나 여호와는 마음을 본다. 이어서 이새는 아비나답을 불러 사무엘 옆으로 지나가게 했습니다. 사무엘이 말했습니다. 여호와께서는 이 사람도 뽑지 않으셨소. 그러자 이새는 산마를 지나가게 했으나 사무엘은 또 이렇게 말했습니다. 아니요, 여호와께서는 이 사람도 뽑지 않으셨소. 이새는 자기 아들 7명을 사무엘 앞으로 지나가게 했습니다. 그러나 사무엘은 여호와께서는 이 아들들 중 누구도 뽑지 않으셨소 라고 이새에게 말했습니다. 그리고 나서 사무엘이 이새에게 물었습니다. 여기 있는 아들이 전부요? 이새가 대답했습니다. 막내 아들이 더 있습니다. 그 아이는 밖에서 양들을 돌보고 있습니다. 사무엘이 말했습니다. 그 아이를 불러오시오. 그 아이가 오기 전까지 식탁에 앉지 않겠소. 그리하여 이새는 사람을 보내어 자기 막내 아들을 불러오게 하였습니다. 이새의 막내 아들은 살결이 붉으스레하고 눈이 빛나는 잘생긴 소년이었습니다. 여호와께서 사무엘에게 말씀하셨습니다. 자, 바로 이 소년이다. 일어나 그에게 기름을 부어라. 사무엘은 올리브 기름이 든 그릇을 가지고 형제들이 보는 앞에서 이새의 막내 아들에게 기름을 부었습니다. 그날부터 여호와의 영이 큰 힘으로 다윗에게 들어갔습니다. 그 일이 있은 후에 사무엘은 라마로 돌아갔습니다. 여호와의 영이 사울에게서 떠났습니다. 그리고 여호와께서 보내신 나쁜 영이 사울을 괴롭혔습니다. 사울의 종들이 사울에게 말했습니다. 하나님이 보내신 나쁜 영이 왕을 괴롭히고 있습니다. 우리에게 명령하십시오. 우리가 수금을 탈 수 있는 사람을 찾아보겠습니다. 여호와께서 보내신 나쁜 영이 왕에게 들어와 괴롭힐 때 그 사람에게 수금을 타게 하면 나쁜 영이 왕에게서 떠나가고 기분이 좋아지실 것입니다. 그러자 사울이 자기 종들에게 말했습니다. 그런 사람을 찾아보아라. 수금을 잘 타는 사람이 있으면 나에게 데리고 오너라. 사울의 종 중에서 한 사람이 말했습니다. 베들레헴의 이새에게 수금을 타는 아들이 하나 있는데 저는 그 사람이 수금을 타는 것을 본 적이 있습니다. 그 사람은 용감하고 싸움을 잘하며 말도 잘하고 잘생겼습니다. 게다가 여호와께서 그 사람과 함께하고 계십니다. 그리하여 사울은 이새에게 사자를 보내어 말을 전했습니다. 양을 치는 당신의 아들 다윗을 나에게 보내시오. 이새는 나귀 위에 포도주가 가득 담긴 가죽 부대와 빵을 실었습니다. 또 염소 새끼 한 마리도 가지고 왔습니다. 이새는 이 모든 것을 자기 아들 다윗과 함께 사울에게 보냈습니다. 다윗은 사울에게 와서 사울을 섬기기 시작하였습니다. 사울은 다윗을 매우 사랑하였습니다. 다윗은 사울의 무기를 맞는 부하가 되었습니다. 사울은 이새에게 심부름꾼을 보내어 말을 전했습니다. 다윗이 이곳에 머물면서 나를 섬기게 하시오. 나는 다윗이 좋소. 하나님이 보내신 나쁜 영이 사울에게 들어와 괴롭힐 때마다 다윗은 자기의 수금을 타곤 했습니다. 그러면 나쁜 영이 사울에게서 나갔으며 그때마다 사울은 기분이 좋아졌습니다. 사무엘상 17장. 블레셋 사람들이 전쟁을 하기 위해 군대를 모았습니다. 블레셋 사람들은 유다 땅 소고에 모여서 소고와 아세가 사이에 있는 에베스담밈에 진을 쳤습니다. 사울과 이스라엘 사람들도 엘라 골짜기에 모여 진을 쳤습니다. 이스라엘 사람들은 블레셋 사람들과 싸울 대형을 갖췄습니다. 블레셋 사람들은 한 언덕을 차지하고 있었고 이스라엘 사람들은 다른 언덕을 차지하고 있었습니다. 그 사이에는 골짜기가 있었습니다. 블레셋 사람들에게는 골리앗이라는 한 대장이 있었습니다. 그 사람은 가드 사람이었고 키는 6규빗 한 뼘가량 되었습니다. 머리에 노수로 만든 투구를 쓰고 노수로 만든 갑옷을 입고 있었는데 그 갑옷은 무게가 5,000세겔가량 되었습니다. 다리에도 노수로 만든 보호대를 대고 있었으며 등에는 작은 노창을 메고 있었습니다. 그 사람이 가지고 있는 큰 창의 나무 부분은 배틀채만큼 컸습니다. 그리고 그 창날의 무게는 600세겔가량 되었습니다. 그 사람의 커다란 방패를 든 부하가 그 사람 앞에 걸어 나왔습니다. 골리앗이 서서 이스라엘 군인들에게 소리를 질렀습니다. 너희는 어찌하여 싸울 대형을 갖추고 있느냐? 나는 블레셋 사람이고 너희는 사울의 종들이다. 한 사람을 뽑아 나에게 보내어 싸우게 하여라. 만약 누구든지 나를 죽일 수 있다면 우리가 너희들의 종이 되겠다. 그러나 내가 그 사람을 죽이면 너희가 우리의 종이 되어야 한다. 골리앗은 또 이렇게 말하였습니다. 오늘 내가 너희 이스라엘 군대를 이렇게 조롱하는데 나와 싸울 놈이 없단 말이냐? 사울과 이스라엘 사람들은 이 블레셋 사람의 말을 듣고 무서워서 벌벌 떨었습니다. 다윗은 에브라 사람 이새의 아들이었습니다. 이새는 유다 땅 베들레헴 사람이었는데 아들이 8명 있었습니다. 사울 때의 이새는 이미 나이가 많은 노인이었습니다. 이새의 아들 중 위로부터 세 아들은 사울과 함께 싸움터에 있었습니다. 첫째 아들은 엘리압이었고 둘째 아들은 아비나답이었으며 셋째 아들은 삼마였습니다. 다윗은 막내 아들이었습니다. 이새의 아들 중 위로부터 세 아들은 사울을 따르고 있었습니다. 다윗은 사울이 있는 곳과 베들레헴 사이를 왔다 갔다 하고 있었습니다. 다윗은 베들레헴에서 자기 아버지의 양떼를 치고 있었습니다. 블레셋 사람 골리앗은 매일 아침 저녁으로 이스라엘 군대 앞에 나왔었습니다. 그러기를 40일 동안 하였습니다. 이새가 자기 아들 다윗에게 말하였습니다. 이 볶은곡식 한 에바와 빵 10덩이를 진에 있는 내 형들에게 갖다 주어라. 또 이 치즈 10덩이도 가지고 가서 내 형들의 천부장에게 주어라. 그리고 내 형들이 어떻게 지내는지 알아보아라. 형들이 모두 잘 있다는 증거가 될 만한 것을 나에게 가지고 오너라. 그때 다윗의 형들은 사울과 이스라엘 군대와 함께 엘라 골짜기에서 블레셋 사람들과 싸우고 있었습니다. 다음 날 다윗은 아침 일찍 일어나 다른 목동에게 양떼를 맡겼습니다. 다윗은 음식을 가지고 이새가 말한 대로 집을 떠났습니다. 다윗이 진에 도착했을 때 이스라엘 군대는 자기진을 떠나서 싸움터로 나아가 함성을 지르고 있었습니다. 이스라엘 사람들과 블레셋 사람들은 대형을 갖추고 서로 마주보면서 싸울 준비를 하고 있었습니다. 다윗은 자기가 가지고 온 음식을 집 맡은 사람에게 맡기고 싸움터로 나아가 형들을 만나 편안히 잘 있는지를 물었습니다. 다윗이 형들과 이야기를 하고 있을 때 블레셋의 거인 골리앗이 또 나왔습니다. 골리앗은 보통 때처럼 이스라엘을 향하여 소리를 질러댔습니다. 다윗도 그 소리를 들었습니다. 이스라엘 사람들은 골리앗을 보자 무서워 벌벌 떨며 달아나고 말았습니다. 이스라엘 사람들이 자기들끼리 말했습니다. 저 사람 골리앗을 봐라. 저 사람은 계속해서 이스라엘에게 욕을 퍼붓고 있다. 왕은 골리앗을 죽이는 사람에게 많은 돈을 주고 자기 딸도 주고 아내로 삼게 하고 그 사람의 가족에게는 세금을 면제해 주기로 했다네. 다윗이 가까이에 서 있는 사람들에게 물었습니다. 이 블레셋 사람을 죽여 이스라엘에게서 수치를 없애버리는 사람에게 어떤 상을 줍니까? 저 할례 받지 못한 블레셋 사람이 누군데 감히 살아계신 하나님의 군대를 욕할 수 있습니까? 이스라엘 사람들이 다윗에게 골리앗을 죽인 사람에게 어떤 상이 주어지는지를 이야기해 주었습니다. 다윗이 군인들과 이야기하는 것을 다윗의 제일 큰형 엘리압이 들었습니다. 엘리압은 다윗에게 화를 내며 말했습니다. 넌 여기에 왜 왔니? 들에 있는 내 양들을 누구에게 맡겨두었니? 건방지고 잘난치 않은 아이야. 넌 지금 아무짝에도 쓸모없는 짓을 하고 있어. 넌 지금 전쟁 구경을 하려고 여기 온 거야. 다윗이 물었습니다. 제가 무엇을 잘못했어요? 군인들하고 이야기한 것도 잘못인가요? 그리고 나서 다윗은 다른 사람들에게 가서 똑같은 질문을 하였습니다. 그러자 그 사람들도 다른 사람들과 똑같이 대답했습니다. 어떤 사람들이 다윗의 한 말을 듣고 그 말을 사울에게 전했습니다. 그러자 사울은 사람을 보내어 다윗을 데려오게 하였습니다. 다윗이 사울에게 말했습니다. 용기를 잃은 사람이 있으면 안 됩니다. 왕의 종인 제가 나가서 저 블레셋 사람과 싸우겠습니다. 사울이 대답했습니다. 너는 저 블레셋 사람과 싸울 수 없다. 너는 아직 어린 아이일 뿐이지만 골리앗은 젊었을 때부터 싸움을 많이 해온 뛰어난 군인이다. 그러나 다윗이 사울에게 말했습니다. 왕의 종인 저는 내 아버지의 양떼를 지키던 사람입니다. 사자나 곰이 나타나서 양을 물어가면 저는 그놈을 공격하여 그 입에서 양을 구해냈습니다. 저놈이 저를 공격하면 저는 그놈의 턱을 잡고 때려 죽이기도 하였습니다. 왕의 종인 저는 사자와 곰도 죽였습니다. 할례 받지 않은 블레셋 사람인 골리앗도 제가 죽인 사자나 곰과 같은 꼴이 될 것입니다. 왜냐하면 골리앗은 살아계신 하나님의 군대를 욕했기 때문에 죽어야 합니다. 여호와께서는 나를 사자와 곰에게서 구해 주셨습니다. 여호와께서는 나를 이 블레셋 사람으로부터도 구해 주실 것입니다. 사울이 다윗에게 말했습니다. 가거라. 여호와께서 너와 함께 하시길 빈다. 사울은 자기 옷을 다윗에게 입혀주었습니다. 사울은 다윗의 머리에 노투구를 씌워주고 몸에도 갑옷을 입혀주었습니다. 다윗은 사울의 칼을 차고 몇 걸음 걸어보았지만 투구와 갑옷이 거추장스러워서 걸을 수가 없었습니다. 다윗이 사울에게 말했습니다. 이 옷을 입고 갈 수 없습니다. 거추장스러워서 몸을 움직일 수가 없습니다. 다윗은 투구와 갑옷을 다 벗어버렸습니다. 다윗은 손에 막대기를 들었습니다. 그리고 시냇가에서 조약돌 5개를 주어서 양을 칠 때 쓴 주머니에 넣고 손에는 물매를 들었습니다. 그리고 나서 골리앗에게 나아갔습니다. 바로 그때 블레셋 사람 골리앗도 다윗에게 다가오고 있었습니다. 골리앗의 방패를 든 사람이 골리앗 앞에 있었습니다. 골리앗은 다윗을 바라보았습니다. 골리앗은 다윗이 살결이 불그스레하고 잘생긴 어린아이라는 것을 알았습니다. 골리앗은 불쾌한 표정으로 다윗을 내려다보았습니다. 골리앗이 다윗에게 말했습니다. 막대기를 가지고 오다니 너는 내가 개인 줄 아느냐? 골리앗은 자기 신들의 이름을 들먹이며 다윗을 저주하였습니다. 골리앗이 다윗에게 말했습니다. 이리 오너라. 내가 네 몸을 공중의 새와 들짐승에게 먹이로 줄 것이다. 다윗이 골리앗에게 말했습니다. 너는 나에게 칼과 큰 창과 작은 창을 가지고 나오지만 나는 만군의 여호와의 이름으로 너에게 간다. 여호와는 이스라엘 군대의 하나님이시다. 너는 여호와께 욕을 했다. 오늘 여호와께서는 너를 나에게 주실 것이다. 나는 너를 죽여 너의 머리를 벨 것이며 블레셋 군인들의 몸을 공중의 새와 들짐승에게로 먹이로 줄 것이다. 그렇게 하여 이스라엘에 하나님이 계시다는 것을 온 세상이 알게 할 것이다. 여기 모인 모든 사람들에게 여호와께서는 자기 백성을 구하시기 위하여 칼이나 창을 쓰실 필요가 없다는 것을 알게 할 것이다. 싸움은 여호와의 것이다. 하나님께서 우리가 너희 모두를 물리쳐 이기도록 도와주실 것이다. 골리앗이 다윗을 공격하기 위해 가까이 왔을 때 다윗도 재빨리 골리앗을 향해 달려갔습니다. 다윗은 자기 주머니에서 돌 하나를 꺼내어 물매에 올려놓은 다음 물매로 돌을 던졌습니다. 돌이 날아가 블레셋 사람의 이마를 맞췄습니다. 골리앗은 앞으로 꼬꾸라졌습니다. 이처럼 다윗은 물매와 돌 하나만 가지고 블레셋 사람을 물리쳐 이겼습니다. 다윗은 그 사람을 돌로 맞춰 죽였습니다. 다윗은 손에 칼도 가지고 있지 않았습니다. 다윗은 달려가서 블레셋 사람을 밟고 섰습니다. 다윗은 골리앗의 칼을 그의 칼집에서 꺼내어 그것으로 골리앗을 죽였습니다. 그리고 나서 골리앗의 머리를 베었습니다. 블레셋 사람들은 자기 대장이 죽은 것을 보고 뒤로 돌아 달아났습니다. 이스라엘과 유다 사람들은 소리를 지르며 블레셋 사람들을 뒤쫓기 시작하였습니다. 그들은 가드성으로 들어가는 곳과 에그론 성문까지 블레셋 사람들을 뒤쫓았습니다. 많은 블레셋 사람들이 죽었습니다. 죽거나 부상당한 블레셋 사람들이 가드와 에그론으로 가는 사하라임 길에 쓰러졌습니다. 이스라엘 사람들은 블레셋 사람들을 뒤쫓다가 다시 돌아와서 블레셋 사람들을 지내서 많은 물건을 가져갔습니다. 다윗은 골리앗의 머리를 가지고 예루살렘으로 갔습니다. 다윗은 골리앗의 무기들도 자기 천막에 두었습니다. 사울은 다윗이 골리앗과 싸우러 나갈 때 군대 지휘관인 아브넬에게 물었습니다. 아브넬이여, 저 젊은이의 아버지가 누군가? 아브넬이 대답했습니다. 왕이시여, 정말이지 저는 모르겠습니다. 사울이 말했습니다. 저 젊은이가 누구의 아들인지 알아보시오. 다윗이 골리앗을 죽이고 돌아오자 아브넬은 다윗을 사울에게 데리고 갔습니다. 다윗은 그때까지 골리앗의 머리를 들고 있었습니다. 사울이 다윗에게 물었습니다. 젊은이여, 그대의 아버지는 누구인가? 다윗이 대답했습니다. 나는 베들레헴 사람 이새의 아들입니다.
사무엘상 제18장. 다윗이 사무엘과 이야기를 나누고 있는 모습을 본 요나단은 이미 마음속으로 다윗을 매우 좋아하게 되었습니다. 요나단은 다윗을 자기 목숨처럼 아끼고 사랑했습니다. 사울은 그날부터 다윗을 자기 곁에 있게 했습니다. 사울은 다윗이 자기 아버지 집으로 돌아가는 것을 허락하지 않았습니다. 요나단은 다윗을 자기 목숨처럼 아끼고 사랑했기 때문에 다윗과 영원한 우정을 약속했습니다. 요나단은 자기 겉옷을 벗어 다윗에게 주었습니다. 또 자기 갑옷과 칼과 활과 띠까지 모두 주었습니다. 사울은 다윗을 보내어 여러 싸움터에서 싸우게 했는데 다윗은 그때마다 늘 이겼습니다. 그래서 사울은 다윗을 군대 지휘하는 사령관으로 삼았습니다. 그러자 사울의 부하들과 모든 백성들이 기뻐했습니다. 다윗이 블레셋 사람 골리앗을 죽인 후 다른 사람들과 함께 돌아올 때 이스라엘의 온 마을에서 여자들이 사울 왕을 맞이하기 위해 나왔습니다. 여자들은 기쁨의 노래를 부르면서 춤을 추고 소고와 경쇠를 연주했습니다. 여자들은 악기를 연주하면서 이렇게 노래했습니다. 사울이 죽인 적은 천천히요, 다윗이 죽인 적은 만만이라네. 여자들의 노래는 사울의 기분을 상하게 만들었습니다. 그는 크게 화가 났습니다. 사울이 생각했습니다. 여자들은 다윗이 수만 명을 죽이고 나는 수천 명밖에 죽이지 않았다고 말하는구나. 이대로 가다가는 다윗이 나라를 차지하고 말겠구나. 그리하여 사울은 그날부터 다윗을 경계하는 눈으로 바라보았습니다. 사울은 다윗을 질투했습니다. 이튿날 하나님이 보내신 나쁜 영이 사울에게 강하게 들어갔습니다. 그러자 사울은 자기 집에서 미친 사람처럼 말을 했습니다. 다윗은 보통 때처럼 수금을 타고 있었고 사울은 손에 창을 들고 있었습니다. 사울은 창을 들어 올리며 다윗을 벽에 박아 버려야지 하면서 창을 던졌습니다. 그러나 다윗은 그 창을 2번이나 피해 도망갔습니다. 여호와께서는 다윗과 함께 하셨으나 사울에게서는 떠나셨습니다. 그래서 사울은 다윗을 두려워했습니다. 사울은 다윗을 멀리 보내어 작은 부대 지휘관으로 임명하였습니다. 그리하여 다윗은 작은 부대를 이끌고 싸움터에 나갔습니다. 여호와께서 다윗과 함께 하셨기 때문에 나가 싸울 때마다 승리하였습니다. 사울은 다윗이 크게 승리하는 것을 보고 점점 더 다윗을 두려워했습니다. 그러나 이스라엘과 유다의 모든 백성들은 다윗을 사랑하였습니다. 왜냐하면 다윗이 군대를 이끌고 전쟁을 할 때마다 모두 승리하였기 때문입니다. 사울이 다윗에게 말했습니다. 여기에 내 맏딸 메랍이 있다. 내 딸을 너에게 주어 너의 아내로 삼게 해주겠다. 그 대신 너는 나가서 용감하게 여호와를 위해 싸워라. 사울은 또 이렇게 마음먹었습니다. 다윗이 블레셋 사람들의 손에 죽을 테니 내가 다윗을 죽일 필요가 없다. 그러나 다윗이 말했습니다. 이런 대접은 나에게 분에 넘치는 것입니다. 그리고 내 아버지의 집안도 왕의 사위가 되기에는 보잘것없는 집안입니다. 그러나 다윗이 사울의 땅 메랍과 결혼할 때가 되었을 때 사울은 메랍을 다윗 대신에 무을랏 사람 아드리엘에게 주었습니다. 그런데 사울의 둘째 딸 미갈이 다윗을 사랑하였습니다. 미갈이 다윗을 사랑하고 있다는 이야기를 전해 들은 사울은 잘된 일이라고 생각했습니다. 사울은 생각했습니다. 미갈을 다윗과 결혼시켜야겠다. 그리고 미갈을 이용해 다윗을 블레셋 사람들의 손에 죽게 해야겠다. 그리하여 사울은 2번째로 다윗에게 내 사위가 되지 않겠나 하고 물었습니다. 그리고 사울은 자기 종들에게 명령을 내렸습니다. 다윗에게 몰래 이렇게 말하여라. 왕은 당신을 좋아하고 있소. 왕의 종들도 당신을 좋아하고 있으니 당신은 왕의 사위가 되어야 하오. 사울의 종들은 이 명령대로 다윗에게 말했습니다. 그러나 다윗은 대답했습니다. 여러분의 왕의 사위가 되는 것이 쉽다고 생각하시오. 나는 가난하고 보잘것없는 사람입니다. 그러자 사울의 종들이 다윗의 말을 사울에게 전했습니다. 사울이 말했습니다. 다윗에게 이렇게 말하여라. 왕은 그렇게 많은 것을 요구하지 않습니다. 왕이 원하는 것은 블레셋 사람들의 포피 100개일 뿐이요. 단지 왕의 원수를 갚아드리면 되오. 사울은 다윗을 블레셋 사람들의 손에 죽게 만들 속셈이었습니다. 사울의 종들은 이 말을 그대로 다윗에게 전했습니다. 다윗은 자기가 왕의 사위가 될 수 있다고 생각하니 기뻤습니다. 정한 날짜가 가까이 왔습니다. 그래서 다윗과 그의 부하들은 밖으로 나가 블레셋 사람 200명을 죽였습니다. 다윗은 블레셋 사람들의 포피를 베어서 사울에게 가지고 갔습니다. 다윗은 왕의 사위가 되고 싶어 했습니다. 그리하여 사울은 자기 딸 미갈을 다윗의 아내로 주었습니다. 사울은 여호와께서 다윗과 함께 하신다는 것을 알았습니다. 사울은 자기 딸 미갈이 다윗을 사랑하는 것도 알았습니다. 그래서 사울은 다윗을 더욱 두려워하게 되었습니다. 사울은 평생토록 다윗의 원수가 되었습니다. 블레셋의 지휘관들은 계속해서 이스라엘을 공격해 왔습니다. 그러나 그때마다 다윗은 그들을 물리쳐 이겼습니다. 다윗은 사울의 부하들보다 더 많은 공을 세웠습니다. 그리하여 다윗은 더 유명해졌습니다. 사무엘상 제19장. 사울이 자기 아들 요나단과 자기의 모든 종들에게 다윗을 죽이라고 말했습니다. 그러나 요나단은 다윗을 매우 아꼈습니다. 그래서 요나단은 다윗에게 이렇게 귓속말을 해주었습니다. 내 아버지 사울이 자네를 죽일 기회를 찾고 있네. 그러니 조심하여 내일 아침에 아무도 모르는 곳에 숨어있게. 내가 아버지와 함께 자네가 숨어있는 들로 나가서 자네에 대해 아버지에게 이야기를 해보겠네. 그런 다음 내가 알아낸 것을 자네에게도 알려주겠네. 요나단은 자기 아버지 사울과 이야기를 했습니다. 요나단은 다윗에 대해 좋은 말을 했습니다. 요나단이 말했습니다. 아버지는 왕이십니다. 아버지의 종 다윗에게 나쁜 일을 하지 마십시오. 다윗은 아버지에게 나쁜 일을 하지 않았습니다. 다윗이 한 일은 오히려 아버지에게 크게 도움이 되었습니다. 다윗은 자기 목숨을 걸고 블레셋 사람 골리앗을 죽였습니다. 여호와께서는 온 이스라엘이 큰 승리를 거두게 하셨습니다. 아버지도 그것을 보시고 기뻐하셨는데 왜 다윗에게 나쁜 일을 하려 하십니까? 다윗은 죄가 없습니다. 그를 죽일 이유가 없습니다. 사울은 요나단의 말을 듣고 이렇게 약속하였습니다. 여호와께 맹세하지만 나는 결코 다윗을 죽이지 않겠다. 그러나 요나단은 다윗을 불러냈습니다. 요나단은 아버지 사울이 한 모든 말을 다윗에게 이야기해 주었습니다. 그리고 요나단은 다윗을 사울에게 데리고 갔습니다. 그리하여 다윗은 전처럼 사울과 함께 있게 되었습니다. 다시 전쟁이 일어나자 다윗은 나가서 블레셋 사람들과 싸웠습니다. 다윗은 그들을 물리쳐 이겼고 그들은 다윗 앞에서 달아났습니다. 사울이 손에 창을 들고 자기 집에 앉아있을 때 여호와께서 보내신 나쁜 영이 사울에게 들어갔습니다. 다윗은 그 앞에서 수금을 타고 있었습니다. 사울은 창을 들어 다윗에게 던졌습니다. 그러나 다윗은 몸을 피하여 다치지 않았고 사울의 창은 벽에 박혔습니다. 다윗은 그날 밤에 사울에게서 도망쳤습니다. 사울은 다윗의 집으로 사람들을 보내어 집 밖에서 지키고 있다가 아침에 다윗을 죽이라고 했습니다. 그러나 다윗의 아내인 미갈이 다윗에게 말해 주었습니다. 당신은 오늘 밤 안으로 도망쳐야 목숨을 건질 수 있어요. 지금 도망가지 않으면 내일 아침 죽을 거예요. 미갈은 창문을 통해 다윗을 밖으로 내려보냈습니다. 그래서 다윗은 피했습니다. 미갈은 우상을 가져다가 침대 위에 놓고 옷으로 싼 다음에 염소털을 그 머리에 씌웠습니다. 사울은 다윗을 잡으려고 사람들을 보냈습니다. 그러나 미갈은 다윗은 아파요 하고 말했습니다. 다윗을 잡으러 갔던 사람들이 사울에게 돌아와서 미갈의 말을 전하였지만 사울은 그 사람들을 다시 돌려보내 다윗을 잡아오게 했습니다. 사울은 그들에게 말했습니다. 침대를 통째로 들고 오너라. 내가 다윗을 죽여버리겠다. 그러나 다윗을 잡으러 간 사람들이 다윗의 집에 들어가 보니 침대 위에 있는 것은 우상이었고 머리털은 염소의 털이었습니다. 사울이 미갈에게 말했습니다. 너는 왜 이런 식으로 나를 속였느냐? 너는 내 원수를 달아나게 했도다. 미갈이 사울에게 대답했습니다. 다윗이 자기를 도망갈 수 있게 해주지 않으면 나를 죽여버리겠다고 했어요. 다윗은 사울을 피해 도망간 후에 라마에 있는 사무엘에게 갔습니다. 다윗은 사무엘에게 사울이 자기에게 한 모든 일을 말해주었습니다. 다윗과 사무엘은 나요스로 가서 거기에 머물렀습니다. 사울은 다윗이 라마의 나요스에 있다는 소식을 들었습니다. 그래서 사람들을 보내어 다윗을 잡아오게 하였습니다. 그 사람들이 다윗을 잡으러 갔을 때 그들은 예언을 하고 있는 예언자들을 보았습니다. 그리고 사무엘이 그 예언자들의 우두머리로 입는 것도 보았습니다. 그때 하나님의 영이 사울이 보낸 사람들에게 들어가서 그들도 예언을 하게 되었습니다. 사울이 그 소식을 들었습니다. 그래서 다른 사람을 보냈지만 그 사람들도 예언을 하였습니다. 세 번째로 사람을 보냈지만 그 사람들도 예언을 하였습니다. 그래서 이번에는 사울이 직접 라마로 갔습니다. 사울은 세구에 있는 우물에 이르러 물었습니다. 사무엘과 다윗이 어디에 있소? 백성들이 대답하였습니다. 라마의 나요스에 있습니다. 그 말을 듣고 사울은 라마의 나요스로 갔습니다. 그러나 하나님의 영이 사울에게도 들어갔습니다. 사울은 걸으면서 예언을 하다가 라마의 나요스까지 갔습니다. 사울은 자기 옷을 벗고 사무엘 앞에서 예언을 하였습니다. 사울은 지쳐 쓰러졌습니다. 그리고 하루 동안 밤새도록 그렇게 누워 있었습니다. 그래서 사울도 예언자 중 한 사람인가 라는 말이 생겨났습니다. 사무엘상 제20장. 그때 다윗은 라마의 나요스에서 달아났습니다. 다윗은 요나단에게 가서 이렇게 물었습니다. 내가 무슨 잘못을 했나? 내 죄가 무엇인가? 내가 자네 아버지에게 무슨 잘못을 저질렀기에 자네 아버지가 나를 죽이려고 하는가? 요나단이 대답하였습니다. 아닐세, 자네는 결코 죽지 않을 걸세. 아버지는 아무리 작은 일을 하시더라도 먼저 나에게 말씀을 해주신다네. 자네를 죽일 생각이 있었다면 반드시 나에게도 말씀해 주셨을 걸세. 아버지는 결코 자네를 죽이지 않을 걸세. 다윗이 다시 말했습니다. 자네 아버지는 내가 자네 친구라는 것을 잘 알고 계시네. 자네 아버지는 속으로 이렇게 생각하고 계실 걸세. 요나단에게는 이 일을 알리지 말아야지. 만약 요나단이 이를 알면 다윗에게 말해버릴 거야. 그러나 여호와와 자네에게 맹세하지만 난 곧 죽을 걸세. 요나단이 다윗에게 말했습니다. 자네가 해달라는 것은 무엇이든 해주겠네. 다윗이 말했습니다. 이보게, 내일은 초하루 축제일일세. 나는 왕과 함께 식사를 하게 되어 있네. 하지만 나는 3일 저녁까지 들에 숨어 있겠네. 자네 아버지가 내가 없어졌다는 것을 눈치채시면 이렇게 말해주게나. 다윗은 나에게 자기 고향 베들레헴으로 가게 해달라고 말했어요. 해마다 이맘때에는 그의 온 가족이 제사를 드린답니다. 만약 자네 아버지가 잘했다라고 말씀하시면 나는 무사할 걸세. 하지만 자네 아버지가 화를 내시면 자네 아버지가 날 해칠 생각이 있는 걸로 알게나. 요나단 자네 종인 나를 도와주게. 자네는 여호와 앞에서 나와 약속을 하였네. 나에게 죄가 있다면 자네가 나를 죽이게나. 자네 아버지에게 넘겨줄 필요가 없지 않겠나. 요나단이 대답했습니다. 아닐세, 결코 이럴 수 없네. 아버지가 만약 자네를 해칠 생각을 갖고 있다는 것을 알게 되면 반드시 자네에게 알려주겠네. 다윗이 물었습니다. 자네 아버지가 자네에게 엄하게 대답하면 누가 나에게 알려줄 수 있겠나? 요나단이 다윗에게 말했습니다. 이스라엘의 하나님 여호와 앞에서 이렇게 약속하네. 모레 이맘때까지 아버지의 마음을 알아보겠네. 만약 아버지가 자네에게 나쁜 마음을 품고 계시지 않다면 자네에게 그 소식을 알려주겠네. 하지만 만약 아버지가 자네를 해칠 마음을 품고 계시다면 그 사실도 자네에게 알려주겠네. 그래서 자네가 안전하게 멀리 도망갈 수 있도록 하겠네. 그렇게 하지 않는다면 하나님께서 나에게 무서운 벌을 내리셔도 감당하겠네. 여호와께서 내 아버지와 함께 계셨던 것처럼 자네와도 함께 계시기를 바라네. 내가 살아있는 동안 나에게 여호와의 사랑을 베풀어 주게나. 그래서 내가 죽지 않게 해주게. 내 집안에도 변함없이 사랑을 베풀어 주어야 하네. 여호와께서 자네의 모든 원수를 이 땅에서 없애버리시더라도 우리 집안에 대한 사랑을 버리지 말아주게. 요나단은 다윗과 약속을 하며 여호와께서 다윗의 원수들을 벌주시기를 바라네 하고 말했습니다. 그리고 요나단은 다윗에게 자기와 맺은 사랑의 약속을 다시 말하게 했습니다. 내일은 초하루 축제일이네. 하지만 자네의 자리는 빌 것이고 내 아버지는 자네가 없어졌다는 것을 알게 될 것세. 이틀 뒤에 자네는 지난번에 숨어있던 곳으로 가서 에셀바위 곁에서 기다리게. 그러면 내가 화살 세 발을 바위 가까이로 쏘겠네. 마치 어떤 목표물을 향해 쏘는 것처럼 쏘겠네. 그리고 나서 소년을 한 명 보내서 그 화살들을 찾으라고 말하겠네. 만약 내가 얘야 너무 멀리 갔다. 화살은 내 뒤쪽에 있으니 이리 주워오너라 하고 말하면 자네는 숨어있는 곳에서 나와도 상관없네. 여호와께 맹세하지만 자네에게 위험한 일이 없을 테니 그곳에서 나와도 좋을 걸세. 하지만 만약 내가 얘야 화살은 내 앞쪽에 있다 하고 말하면 여호와께서 자네를 보내시는 것으로 알고 그곳을 떠나게나. 우리가 이야기한 것을 기억하게. 여호와께서는 자네와 나 사이의 영원한 증인이시네. 그리하여 다윗은 들에 숨었습니다. 초하루 축제일이 이르자 왕이 식탁에 앉았습니다. 왕은 언제나 앉았던 자리인 벽 가까이에 앉았습니다. 요나단은 왕의 맞은편에 앉았고 아브넬은 왕의 곁에 앉았습니다. 하지만 다윗의 자리는 비어 있었습니다. 그날 사무엘은 아무 말도 하지 않았습니다. 사울은 다윗에게 무슨 부정한 일이 생겨 나오지 못한 거겠지 라고 생각했습니다. 이튿날은 그 달의 두 번째 날이었습니다. 다윗의 자리가 또 비어 있었습니다. 이번에는 사울이 요나단에게 물었습니다. 이새의 아들은 왜 이 식탁에 어제도 오지 않고 오늘도 오지 않는 거냐? 요나단이 대답하였습니다. 다윗이 나에게 베들레헴으로 가게 해달라고 부탁했습니다. 다윗은 우리 가족이 마을에서 제사를 드리니 가게 해주게. 형이 나를 오라고 했네. 자네가 내 친구라면 내 형들을 만나게 해주게 하고 말했습니다. 그래서 다윗은 왕의 식탁에 나오지 못했습니다. 그러자 사울은 요나단에게 화를 내며 말했습니다. 이 바보 같은 놈아, 그래 난 내가 이새의 아들 다윗 편인 줄 알고 있었다. 너는 너뿐만이 아니라 너를 낳아준 내 어미도 수치스럽게 만들고 있다. 이새의 아들이 살아있는 한 너는 절대로 왕이 될 수 없고 나라를 가질 수도 없다. 그러니 이제 사람을 보내어 다윗을 끌고 오너라. 다윗을 반드시 죽여야 한다. 요나단이 자기 아버지에게 물었습니다. 다윗이 왜 죽어야 합니까? 다윗이 대체 무슨 잘못을 했습니까? 그러자 사울이 자기 창을 요나단에게 던져 요나단을 죽이려 했습니다. 요나단은 자기 아버지가 다윗을 정말로 죽이려 한다는 것을 알았습니다. 요나단은 크게 화를 내며 식탁을 떠났습니다. 요나단은 아무것도 먹지 않았습니다. 그날은 이달의 이틀째였습니다. 요나단은 다윗을 죽이려는 자기 아버지의 모습을 보고 마음이 상했습니다. 이튿날 아침에 요나단은 전에 약속했던 것처럼 다윗을 만나기 위해 들로 나갔습니다. 요나단은 어린아이를 데리고 갔습니다. 요나단은 아이에게 달려가서 내가 쏘는 화살을 찾아오너라 하고 말했습니다. 아이가 달려가자 요나단은 아이의 앞으로 화살을 쏘았습니다. 아이는 화살이 떨어진 곳으로 달려갔습니다. 요나단은 이 아이 뒤에서 외쳤습니다. 화살이 내 앞쪽에 있지 않느냐? 요나단이 또 외쳤습니다. 서둘러서 빨리 뛰어가거라. 머뭇거리면 안 된다. 아이는 화살을 주어 자기 주인에게 가지고 돌아왔습니다. 아이는 이 일이 무슨 뜻인지 알지 못했지만 요나단과 다윗만은 알고 있었습니다. 그리고 나서 요나단은 자기 무기를 아이에게 주면서 마을로 돌아가거라 하고 말했습니다. 아이가 떠나자 다윗은 바위의 남쪽에서 나왔습니다. 다윗은 땅에 머리를 대고 요나단에게 절을 하였습니다. 요나단은 그렇게 3번 절을 하였습니다. 그리고 나서 다윗과 요나단은 서로 입을 맞추면서 함께 울었습니다. 다윗이 더 많이 울었습니다. 요나단이 다윗에게 말했습니다. 평안히 가게. 우리는 여호와의 이름으로 맹세하였네. 여호와께서 자네와 나 사이에 그리고 우리 자손들 사이에 영원한 증인이시네. 그리고 나서 다윗은 떠났고 요나단은 마을로 돌아갔습니다.
1 Samuel chapter 21. David went to Nob to Ahimelech the priest. Ahimelech trembled when he met him and asked, Why are you alone? Why is no one with you? David answered Ahimelech the priest, The king sent me on a mission and said to me, No one is to know anything about the mission I am sending you on. As for my men, I have told them to meet me at a certain place. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread, or whatever you can find. But the priest answered David, I don't have any ordinary bread on hand. However, there is some consecrated bread here, provided the men have kept themselves from women. David replied, Indeed, women have been kept from us as usual whenever I set out. The men's bodies are holy even on missions that are not holy. How much more so today? So the priest gave him the consecrated bread, since there was no bread there except the bread of the presence that had been removed from before the Lord and replaced by hot bread on the day it was taken away. Now one of Saul's servants was there that day, detained before the Lord. He was Doeg the Edomite, Saul's chief shepherd. David asked Ahimelech, Don't you have a spear or sword here? I haven't brought my sword or any other weapon, because the king's mission was urgent. The priest replied, The sword of Goliath the Philistine whom you killed in the valley of Elah is here. It is wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you want it, take it. There is no sword here but that one. David said, There is none like it. Give it to me. That day David fled from Saul and went to Achish, king of Gath. But the servants of Achish said to him, Isn't this David, the king of the land? Isn't he the one they sing about in their dances? Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. David took these words to heart and was very much afraid of Achish, king of Gath, so he pretended to be insane in their presence. And while he was in their hands, he acted like a madman, making marks on the doors of the gate and letting saliva run down his beard. Achish said to his servants, "Look at the man. He is insane. Why bring him to me? Am I so short of madmen that you have to bring this fellow here to carry on like this in front of me? Must this man come into my house?" Chapter 22. David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and his father's household heard about it, they went down to him there. All those who were in distress or in debt or discontented gathered around him, and he became their commander. About 400 men were with him. From there David went to Mizpah in Moab and said to the king of Moab, "Would you let my father and mother come and stay with you until I learn what God will do for me?" So he left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him as long as David was in their stronghold. But the prophet Gad said to David, "Do not stay in the stronghold. Go into the land of Judah." So David left and went to the forest of Hereth. Now Saul heard that David and his men had been discovered, and Saul was seated, spear in hand, under the tamarisk tree on the hill of Gibeah, with all his officials standing at his side. He said to them, "Listen, men of Benjamin. Will the son of Jesse give all of you fields and vineyards? Will he make all of you commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds? Is that why you have all conspired against me? No one tells me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse. None of you is concerned about me or tells me that my son has incited my servant to lie in wait for me, as he does today." But Doeg the Edomite, who was standing with Saul's officials, said, "I saw the son of Jesse come to Ahimelech, son of Ahitub at Nob." Ahimelech inquired the Lord for him. He also gave him provisions and the sword of Goliath the Philistine. Then the king sent for the priest Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, and all the men of his family who were with the priests at Nob, and they all came to the king. Saul said, "Listen now, son of Ahitub." "Yes, my lord," he answered. Saul said to him, "Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, giving him bread and a sword and inquiring God for him, so that he has rebelled against me and lies in wait for me, as he does today?" Ahimelech answered the king, "Who of all your servants is as loyal as David, the king's son-in-law, captain of your bodyguard, and highly respected in your household? Was that the first time I inquired of God for him? Of course not. Let not the king accuse your servant or any of his father's family, for your servant knows nothing at all about this whole affair." But the king said, "You will surely die, Ahimelech, you and your whole family." Then the king ordered the guards at his side, "Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because they too have sided with David. They knew he was fleeing, yet they did not tell me." But the king's officials were unwilling to raise a hand to strike the priests of the Lord. The king then ordered Doeg, "You turn and strike down the priests." So Doeg the Edomite turned and struck them down. That day he killed 85 men who wore the linen ephod. He also put to the sword Nob, the town of the priests, with its men and women, its children and infants, and its cattle, donkeys, and sheep. But one son of Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled to join David. He told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. Then David said to Abiathar, "That day, when Doeg the Edomite was there, I knew he would be sure to tell Saul, 'I am responsible for the death of your whole family. Stay with me. Don't be afraid. The man who wants to kill you is trying to kill me too. You will be safe with me.'" Chapter 23. When David was told, "Look, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah and are looting the threshing floors," he inquired of the Lord, saying, "Shall I go and attack these Philistines?" The Lord answered him, "Go, attack the Philistines and save Keilah." But David's men said to him, "Here in Judah we are afraid. How much more then if we go to Keilah against the Philistine forces?" Once again David inquired of the Lord, and the Lord answered him, "Go down to Keilah, for I am going to give the Philistines into your hand." So David and his men went to Keilah, fought the Philistines, and carried off their livestock. He inflicted heavy losses on the Philistines and saved the people of Keilah. Now Abiathar, son of Ahimelech, had brought the ephod down with him when he fled to David at Keilah. Saul was told that David had gone to Keilah, and he said, "God has delivered him into my hands, for David has imprisoned himself by entering a town with gates and bars." And Saul called up all his forces for battle, to go down to Keilah to besiege David and his men. When David learned that Saul was plotting against him, he said to Abiathar the priest, "Bring the ephod." David said, Lord, God of Israel, your servant has heard definitely that Saul plans to come to Keilah and destroy the town on account of me. Will the citizens of Keilah surrender me to him? Will Saul come down as your servant has heard? Lord, God of Israel, tell your servant. And the Lord said, He will. Again David asked, Will the citizens of Keilah surrender my men to Saul? And the Lord said, They will. So David and his men, about 600 in number, left Keilah and kept moving from place to place. When Saul was told that David had escaped from Keilah, he did not go there. David stayed in the wilderness strongholds and in the hills of the desert of Ziph. Day after day Saul searched for him, but God did not give David into his hands. While David was at Horesh in the desert of Ziph, he learned that Saul had come out to take his life. And Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horesh and helped him find strength in God. Don't be afraid, he said. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be second to you. Even my father Saul knows this. The two of them made a covenant before the Lord. Then Jonathan went home, but David remained at Horesh. The Ziphites went up to Saul at Gibeah and said, Is not David hiding among us in the strongholds at Horesh on the hill of Hakilah south of Jeshimon? Now, your majesty, come down whenever it pleases you to do so, and we will be responsible for giving him into your hands. Saul replied, The Lord bless you for your concern for me. Go and get more information. Find out where David usually goes and who has seen him there. They tell me he is very crafty. Find out about all the hiding places he uses and come back to me with definite information. Then I will go with you. If he is in the area, I will track him down among all the clans of Judah. So they set out and went to Ziph ahead of Saul. Now David and his men were in the desert of Maon, in the Arabah south of Jeshimon. Saul and his men began the search, and when David was told about it, he went down to the rock and stayed in the desert of Maon. When Saul heard this, he went to the desert of Maon in pursuit of David. Saul was going along one side of the mountain, and David and his men were on the other side, hurrying to get away from Saul. As Saul and his forces were closing in on David and his men to capture them, a messenger came to Saul, saying, Come quickly, the Philistines are raiding the land. Then Saul broke off his pursuit of David and went to meet the Philistines. This is why they call this place Selah Hamalekhoth. And David went up from there and lived in the strongholds of En-Gedi.
1 Samuel 24. After Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told, David is in the desert of En-Gedi. So Saul took 3,000 able young men from all Israel and set out to look for David and his men near the crags of the wild goats. He came to the sheep pens along the way. A cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. David and his men were far back in the cave. The men said, This is the day the Lord spoke of when he said to you, I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish. Then David crept up unnoticed and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Afterward, David was conscience-stricken for having cut off a corner of his robe. He said to his men, The Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lay my hand on him, for he is the anointed of the Lord. With these words David sharply rebuked his men, and did not allow them to attack Saul. And Saul left the cave and went his way. Then David went out of the cave and called out to Saul, My lord, the king. When Saul looked behind him, David bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. He said to Saul, Why do you listen when men say, David is bent on harming you? This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not lay my hand on my Lord, because he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father, look at this piece of your robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe, but did not kill you. See that there is nothing in my hand to indicate that I am guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. May the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me, but my hand will not touch you. As the saying goes, from evildoers come evil deeds, so my hand will not touch you. Against whom has the king of Israel come out? Who are you pursuing? a dead dog, a flea. May the Lord be our judge, and decide between us. May he consider my cause, and uphold it. May he vindicate me by delivering me from your hand." When David finished saying this, Saul asked, "Is that your voice, David my son?" And he wept aloud. "You are more righteous than I," he said. "You have treated me well, but I have treated you badly. You have just now told me about the good you did to me. The Lord delivered me into your hands, but you did not kill me. When a man finds his enemy, does he let him get away unharmed? May the Lord reward you well for the way you treated me today. I know that you will surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands. Now swear to me by the Lord that you will not kill off my descendants or wipe out my name from my father's family." So David gave his oath to Saul. Then Saul returned home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. Samuel 25. Now Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him, and they buried him at his home in Ramah. Then David moved down to the desert of Paran. A certain man in Maon, who had property there at Carmel, was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was sharing in Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman, but her husband was surly and mean in his dealings. He was a Calebite. While David was in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. So he sent 10 young men and said to him, "Go up to Nabal at Carmel and greet him in my name. Say to him, 'Long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours. Now I hear that it is sheep shearing time. When your shepherds were with us, we did not mistreat them, and the whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs was missing. Ask your own servants, and they will tell you. Therefore, be favorable toward my men, since we come at a festive time. Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them." When David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name. Then they waited. Nabal answered David's servants, "Who is this David? Who is the son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water, and the meat I have slaughtered for my sharers, and give it to the men coming from who knows where?" David's men turned around and went back. When they arrived, they reported every word. David said to his men, "Each of you strap on your sword." So they did, and David strapped his on as well. About 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. One of the servants told Abigail, Nabal's wife, "David sent messengers from the wilderness to give our master his greetings, but he hurled insults at them. Yet these men were very good to us. They did not mistreat us, and the whole time we were out in the fields near them, nothing was missing. Night and day there were a wall around us the whole time we were herding our sheep near them. Now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him." Abigail acted quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roast grain, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed figs, and loaded them on donkeys. Then she told her servants, "Go ahead, I'll follow you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal. As she came riding her donkey into a mountain ravine, there were David and his men descending toward her, and she met them. David had just said, "It's been useless. All my watching over this fellow's property in the wilderness so that nothing of his was missing. He has paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him." When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, "Pardon your servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal. He is just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my lord sent. And now, my lord, As surely as the Lord your God lives, and as you live, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed, and from avenging yourself with your own hands, may your enemies and all who are intent of harming my Lord be like Nabal, and let this gift, which your servant has brought to my Lord, be given to the men who follow you. Please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my Lord, because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. When the Lord has fulfilled for my Lord every good thing he promised concerning him, and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed, or of having avenged himself. And when the Lord your God has brought my Lord success, remember your servant. David said to Abigail, Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May ye be blessed for your good judgment, and for keeping me from bloodshed this day, and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you, if ye had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive by daybreak. Then David accepted from her hand what she had brought him, and said, Go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request. When Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a banquet like that of a king. He was in high spirits and very drunk, so she told him nothing at all until daybreak. Then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all these things, and his heart failed him, and he became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, Praise be to the Lord, who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong, and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head. Then David sent word to Abigail, asking her to become his wife. His servants went to Carmel and said to Abigail, David has sent us to you to take you to become his wife. She bowed down with her face to the ground and said, I am your servant, and am ready to serve you and wash the feet of my Lord's servants. Abigail quickly got on a donkey, and, attended by her 5 female servants, went with David's messengers and became his wife. David had also married Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they both were his wives. But Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Paltiel, son of Laish, who was from Galim. 1 Samuel 26. The Ziphites went to Saul at Gibeah and said, Is not David hiding on the hill of Hachilah, which faces Jeshimon? So Saul went down to the desert of Ziph with his 3,000 select Israelite troops to search there for David. Saul made his camp beside the road on the hill of Hachilah, facing Jeshimon, but David stayed in the wilderness. When he saw that Saul had followed him there, he sent out scouts and learned that Saul had definitely arrived. Then David set out and went to the place where Saul had camped. He saw where Saul and Abner son of Ner, the commander of the army, had lain down. Saul was lying inside the camp, with the army encamped around him. David then asked Ahimelech the Hittite and Abishai son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, Who will go down into the camp with me to Saul? I'll go with you, said Abishai. So David and Abishai went to the army by night, and there was Saul, lying asleep inside the camp with a spear stuck in the ground near his head. Abner and the soldiers were lying around him. Abishai said to David, Today God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Now let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I won't strike him twice. But David said to Abishai, Don't destroy him. Who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As surely as the Lord lives, he said, the Lord himself will strike him, or his time will come and he will die, or he will go into battle and perish. But the Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Now get the spear and water jug that are near his head, and let's go. So David took the spear and water jug near Saul's head, and they left. No one saw or knew about it, nor did anyone wake up. They were all sleeping because the Lord had put them into a deep sleep. Then David crossed over to the other side and stood on the top of the hill some distance away. There was a wide space between them. He called out to the army and to Abner son of Ner, "Aren't you going to answer me, Abner?" Abner replied, "Who are you who calls to the king?" David said, "You're a man, aren't you? And who is like you in Israel? Why didn't you guard your lord the king? Someone came to destroy your lord the king. What you have done is not good. As surely as the Lord lives, you and your men must die, because you did not guard your master the Lord's anointed. Look around you. Where are the king's spear and water jug that were near his head?" Saul recognized David's voice and said, "Is that your voice, David my son?" David replied, "Yes it is, my lord the king." And he added, "Why is my lord pursuing his servant? What have I done, and what wrong am I guilty of? Now let my lord the king listen to his servant's words. If the Lord has incited you against me, then may he accept an offering. If, however, people have done it, may they be cursed before the Lord. They have driven me today from my share in the Lord's inheritance, and have said, 'Go, serve other gods.' Now do not let my blood fall to the ground far from the presence of the Lord. The king of Israel has come out to look for a flea, as one hunts a partridge in the mountains." Then Saul said, "I have sinned. Come back, David my son, because you considered my life precious today. I will not try to harm you again. Surely I have acted like a fool and have been terribly wrong." "Here is the king's spear," David answered. "Let one of your young men come over and get it. The Lord rewards everyone for their righteousness and faithfulness. The Lord delivered you into my hands today, but I would not lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. As surely as I valued your life today, so may the Lord value my life and deliver me from all trouble." Then Saul said to David, "May you be blessed, David my son. You will do great things and surely triumph." So David went on his way, and Saul returned home.
1 Samuel chapter 27. David among the Philistines. But David thought to himself, "One of these days I will be destroyed by the hands of Saul. The best thing I can do is to escape the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will give up searching for me anywhere in Israel, and I will slip out of his hand." So David and his 600 men left with him, and went over to Achish son of Maok king of Gath. David and his men settled in Gath with Achish. Each man had his family with him, and David had his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail of Carmel, the widow of Nabal. When Saul was told that David had fled to Gath, he no longer searched for him. Then David said to Achish, "If I have found favor in your eyes, let a place be assigned to me in one of your country towns, that I may live there. Why should your servant live in the royal city with you?" So on that day Achish gave him Ziklag, and it belonged to the kings of Judah ever since. David lived in Philistine territory a year and 4 months. Now David and his men went up and raided the Geshurites, the Girzites, and the Amalekites. From ancient times these people had lived in the land extending to Shur in Egypt. Whenever David attacked an area, he did not leave a man or a woman alive, but took sheep and cattle, donkeys and camels, and clothes. Then he returned to Achish. When Achish asked, "Where did you go raiding today?" David would say, "Against the Negev of Judah, or against the Negev of Jerahmeel, or against the Negev of the Kenites." He did not leave a man or woman alive to be brought to Gath, for he thought, "They might inform on us and say, 'This is what David did.'" And such was the practice as long as he lived in Philistine territory. Achish trusted David and said to himself, "He has become so obnoxious to his people, the Israelites, that he will be my servant for life." 1 Samuel chapter 28. In those days the Philistines gathered their forces to fight against Israel. Achish said to David, "You must understand that you and your men will accompany me in the army." David said, "Then you will see for yourself what your servant can do." Achish replied, "Very well, I will make you my bodyguard. for life. Saul and the medium at Endor. Now Samuel was dead, and all Israel had mourned for him and buried him in his own town of Ramah. Saul had expelled the mediums and spirits from the land. The Philistines assembled and came and set up the camp at Shunem, while Saul gathered all Israel and set up camp in Gilboa. When Saul saw the Philistine army, he was afraid. Terror filled his heart. He inquired of the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him by dreams, or Urim, or prophets. Saul then said to his attendants, "Find me a woman who is medium, so I may go and inquire of her." "There is one in Endor," they said. So Saul disguised himself, putting on other clothes, and at night he and 2 men went to the woman. "Consult a spirit for me," he said, "and bring up for me the one I name." But the woman said to him, "Surely you know what Saul has done. He has cut off the medium spirits from the land. Why have you set a trap for my life to bring about my death?" Saul swore to her by the Lord, "As surely as the Lord lives, you will not be punished with us." Then the woman asked, "Whom shall I bring up for you?" "Bring up Samuel," he said. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out at the top of her voice and said to Saul, "Why have you deceived me? You are Saul." The king said to her, "Don't be afraid. What do you see?" The woman said, "I see a ghostly figure coming out of the earth." "What does he look like?" he asked. "An old man wearing a robe is coming up," she said. Then Saul knew it was Samuel, and he bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" "I am in great distress," Saul said. "The Philistines are fighting against me, and God has departed from me. He no longer answers me, either by prophets or by dreams, so I have called on you to tell me what to do." Samuel said, "Why do you consult me, now that the Lord has departed from you and become your enemy? The Lord has done what he had predicted through me. The Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hands and given it to one of your neighbors, to David, because you did not obey the Lord or carry out his fierce wrath against the Amalekites. The Lord has done this to you today. The Lord will deliver both Israel and you into the hands of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will also give the army of Israel into the hands of the Philistines." Immediately Saul fell full length on the ground, filled with fear because of Samuel's words. His strength was gone, for he had eaten nothing all that day and all that night. When the woman came to Saul and saw that he was greatly shaken, she said, "Look, your servant has obeyed you. I took my life in my hands and did what you told me to do. Now please listen to your servant and let me give you some food so you may eat and have strength to go on your way." He refused and said, "I will not eat." But his men joined the woman in urging him, and he listened to them. He got up from the ground and sat on the couch. The woman had fattened calf at the house, which she butchered at once. She took some flour, kneaded it, and baked bread without yeast. Then she set it before Saul and his men, and they ate. That same night they got up and left. 1 Samuel chapter 29. Achish sends David back to Ziklag. The Philistines gathered all their forces at Aphek, and Israel camped by the spring in Jezreel. As the Philistine rulers marched with their units of hundreds of thousands, David and his men were marching at the rear with Achish. The commanders of the Philistines asked, "What about these Hebrews?" Achish replies, "Is this not David, who was an officer of Saul, king of Israel? He has already been with me for over a year, and from the day he left Saul until now I have found no fault in him." But the Philistine commanders were angry with Achish and said, "Send the man back, that he may return to the place you assigned him. He must not go with us into battle, or he will turn against us during the fighting. How better could he regain his master's favor than by taking the heads of our own men? Isn't this David they sang about in the dances? Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." So Achish called David and said to him, "As surely as the Lord lives, you have been reliable, and I would be pleased to have you serve with me in my army. From the day you came to me until today, I have found no fault in you, but the rulers don't approve of you. Now turn back and go in peace. Do nothing to displease the Philistine rulers." "But what have I done?" asked David. "What have you found against your servant from the day I came to you until now? Why can't I go and fight against the enemies of my lord the king?" Achish answered, "I know that you have been as pleasing in my eyes as an angel of God. Nevertheless, the Philistine commanders have said, 'He must not go up with us into battle.' Now get up early, along with your master's servants who have come with you, and leave in the morning as soon as it is light." So David and his men got up early in the morning to go back to the land of the Philistines, and the Philistines went up to Jezreel.
This is 1 Samuel 30. 3 days later, when David and his men arrived home at the town of Ziklag, they found that the Amalekites had made a raid into the Negev and Ziklag. They had crushed Ziklag and burned it into the ground. They had carried off the women and children and everyone else, but without killing anyone. When David and his men saw the ruins and realized what had happened to their families, they wept until they could weep no more. David's 2 wives, Ahinoam from Zeriel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal from Carmel, were among those captured. David was now in great danger because all his men were very bitter about losing their sons and daughters, and they began to talk of stoning him. But David found strength in the Lord his God. Then he said to Abiathar the priest, "Bring me the ephod." So Abiathar brought it. Then David asked the Lord, "Should I chase after this band of raiders? Will I catch them?" And the Lord told him, "Yes, go after them. You will surely recover everything that was taken from you." So David and his 600 men set out, and they came into the brook Bezah. But 200 of the men were too exhausted to cross the brook, so David continued the pursuit with 400 men. Along the way they found an Egyptian man in a field and brought him to David. They gave him some bread to eat and water to drink. They also gave him part of a fig cake and 2 clusters of raisins, for he hadn't had anything to drink or eat for 3 days and nights. Before long his strength returned. "To whom do you belong and where do you come from?" David asked him. I am an Egyptian, the slave of an Amalek. He replied, "My master abandoned me 3 days ago because I was sick. We were on our way back from raiding the Kithrites in the Negev, the territory of Judah and the land of Caleb, and we had just burned Ziklag. Will you lead me to this band of raiders?" David asked. The young man replied, "If you take an oath in God's name that you will not kill me or give me back to my master, then I will guide you to them." So he led David to them, and they found the Amalekites spread out across the field, eating and drinking and dancing with joy because of the vast amount of plunder they had taken from the Philistines and the land of Judah. David and his men rushed in among them and slaughtered them throughout that night and the entire day until evening. None of the Amalekites escaped except 400 young men who fled on camels. Nothing was missing, small or great, son or daughter, nor anything else that had been taken. David brought everything back. He also recovered all the flocks and herds, and his men drove them ahead of the other livestock. "This plunder belongs to David," they said. Then David returned to the brook Bezah and made up with the 200 men who had been left behind because they were too exhausted to go with him. They went out to meet David and his men, and David greeted him joyfully. But some evil troublemakers among David's men said, "They didn't go with us, so they can't have any of the plunder we recovered. Give them their wives and children, and tell them to be gone." But David said, "No, my brothers, don't be selfish with what the Lord has given us. He has kept us safe and helped us defeat the band of raiders that attacked us." From then on, David made this a decree and regulation for Israel, and it is still followed today. When he arrived at Ziklag, David sent part of the plunder to the elders of Judah, who was his friends. "Here is a present for you, taken from the Lord's enemies," he said. The gifts were sent to the people of the following towns David has visited: Bethel, Ramoth Negev, Satir, Aroeriah, Siphmoth, Eshtemoa, Rachel, the towns of the Jerahmeelites, the towns of the Kenites, Hormah, Borashan, Aphek, Hebron, and all the other places David and his men had visited. This is 1 Samuel 31. Now the Philistines attacked Israel, and the men of Israel fled before them. Many were slaughtered on the slopes of Mount Gilboa. The Philistines closed in on Saul and his sons, and they killed 3 of his sons, Jonathan, Abinadab, and Melchishua. The fighting grew very fierce around Saul, and the Philistine archers caught up with him and wounded him severely. Saul groaned to his armor-bearer, "Take your sword and kill me before these pagan Philistines come to run me through and taunt me and torture me." But his armor-bearer was afraid and would not do it. So Saul took his own sword and fell on it. When his armor-bearer realized that Saul was dead, he fell on his own sword and died beside the king. So Saul, his 3 sons, his armor-bearer, and his troops all died together that same day. When the Israelites on the other side of Jezreel Valley and beyond the Jordan saw that the Israelite army had fled, that Saul and his son was dead, they abandoned the towns and fled. So the Philistines moved in and occupied the towns. The next day, when the Philistines went out to strip the dead, they found the bodies of Saul and his 3 sons on Mount Gilboa. So they cut off Saul's head and stripped off his armor. Then they proclaimed the good news of Saul's death in the pagan temple and to the people throughout the land of Philistia. They placed his armor in the temple of the Ashtoreth, and they fastened his body to the wall of the city of Bethshan. But when the people of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all the mighty warriors traveled through the night to Beshan and took the bodies of Saul and his sons down from the wall. They brought them to Jabesh, where they burned the bodies. Then they took the bones and buried them beneath the tamarisk tree at Jabesh, and they fasted for 7 days.